the agenda, we will be able to go through and have public comment on each of them. For today, we'd like to ask for you, as always, to respect our code of conduct in terms of speaking immediately until when your time ends, making sure your public comment relates to the subject matter of that item, remaining respectful to each other in the forum. In order to participate, you need to use the little raise your hand function on the bottom of the WebEx screen, or you can dial *3 if you're on the phone, and that will raise your hand for us, and we'll call you. Or if you're in person, of course, we welcome you to speak here live in the meeting. If you have any trouble with that, please send Janae a message in the chat, and we'll get you connected. If you'd rather make your comment in writing, please send us an email to info@poc.lacounty.gov. Please don't send your public comments or any comments in the chat. Only the host, only Janae is going to see it, and it won't be logged as public comment since it doesn't comport with our Brown Act responsibilities. Buen día, bienvenidos. Se ha iniciado nuestra conferencia por Webex y si le gustaría hacer comentario público o hacer una pregunta, por favor haga clic en la imagen de la mano que está en la parte baja de la pantalla y alguien le ayudará. Si está escuchando, si nos está llamando, está escuchando la conferencia por teléfono, marque *3 y eso levanta su mano en nuestra pantalla. Si está viendo en vivo por YouTube y ha escrito un comentario, no lo vamos a leer el grupo, entonces necesita conectar vía Webex para hacer su comentario público. Le daremos 4 minutos para su comentario público y podemos proveer traducción. We'll be giving everybody 2 minutes for their public comments today unless Chair Jackson finds that we need to change that for purposes of moving the meeting along. I'm going to call the roll now. Commissioners, please respond when I call your name. We are expecting Commissioner Canales, but she's not here yet, and we'll indicate to the folks attending virtually when she arrives. Commissioner Carrillo is not attending today. Commissioner Garcia-Lays?
Present.
Commissioner Kakani?
Here.
Commissioner Lewis, I believe, is not attending today, but he may be able to join us later. Commissioner Mundo?
Present.
Commissioner Terry?
Here.
And Chair Jackson? Great. And we are missing Commissioner Don Meredith today. He's excused attending the funeral of LA Sheriff Department recruit Alejandro Martinez, to whom I strongly extend my sympathies to his family and colleagues. And Commissioner Canales has joined us. So yes, great, wonderful. So we have a quorum. I'd like to share, Chair Jackson, a comment that Commissioner Meredith wanted to make today regarding the Reserve Deputy Probation Officers and their involvement at Los Padrinos, and he was sorry not to be at the meeting to be able to say this himself. Don's words say, "I want to applaud the Reserve DPOs for stepping up and providing significant assistance at Los Padrinos. Last weekend, and actually I believe we're talking about weekend before last, there were 8 on Saturday, 9 there on Sunday. They assisted in a variety of operations, interacted with staff, families, and youth in a professional and caring manner. I learned that a few of the DPOs, the reserve DPOs who are active or retired officers, have applied for the security specialist position. The RDPOs, the Reserve Deputy Probation Officers who are chaplains, made themselves available at Los Padrinos and the field offices to provide support for our staff." Those are the remarks from Commissioner Meredith. And with that, Chair Jackson, we have quorum, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for that, Wendy. We're going to proceed with agenda item number 2, which is approval of the on the issues related to electronic monitoring on adults and juveniles within the Los Angeles Probation Department. If you'd like to participate or offer public comment on this item, please raise your hand if you're participating virtually. And if you're in the room, you should go to this microphone to my left, and if you're in the audience, it's going to be to your right. We welcome everyone to offer public comment. We'd like to hear from you, so please be encouraged to contribute in that way. And to our presenters, we have Ambrose Brooks from Dignity and Power Now, as well as Richard Giron and Julia Vest from Probation. Richard will present on electronic monitoring on adults, and Julia will present from Probation. And first, we're going to show a short video to my right over here. It's of our recent town hall, which was exceptional. It was facilitated by Commissioner Canales. So thank you for doing that. We sincerely appreciate the honest and thoughtful things that were shared in that process by the panelists. And it was a really impactful sort of moment. So we thank you guys for that and wanted to bring that message back here today for you guys to experience as well. And so I think we can get started with the video.
I spent 3 months on electronic monitoring as a condition of my release after spending more than 22 years incarcerated in prison in Illinois. So I was incarcerated when I was 18 years old. And the entire time that I was there, the only thing that I could think about was getting home to my family, being there for them like I couldn't be when I was incarcerated, and building a life and moving forward. But when I came home in December 2016, at the age of 41, I discovered that EM meant that I was bringing the prison home with me. So for me, it interfered with me reconnecting with my family or positively constructing life.
One day, I remember my mom coming up to the school to get me because she got some notification or something that I wasn't at school, but I was at school. And so that almost caused me to get in more trouble. But thank God that my assistant principal in my school and my teachers, everybody was able to verify that I was in school that day. I was just afraid from what I was told that if I'm somewhere that I'm not supposed to be, that the police would, like a swarm of police would show up. So I was always looking over my shoulder.
At the time, I was going to physical therapy for my broken legs, and I was getting stretched and all that. When they slapped that ankle monitor on me, I stopped going to physical therapy because I was embarrassed and I was ashamed, and I was like, "What are they gonna think when they see this big bracelet on my ankle?" And so I stopped going, and then that really hindered the progress in my recovery during that time. Ankle monitoring literally stopped me from recovering from very debilitating injuries.
For me, electronic monitoring was less a stepping stone back into society than it was a stone around my neck. It impacted every single aspect of my life in a negative way. So when I did get a job, I was terrified that I was going to miss the bus and not make it home and get violated, or that I would be in a car and the car would break down and I would get violated. I go back to prison for it. So it's not just you that is impacted by these things, right? It's everyone everyone you love, everyone who's in the home with you. These things they turn your family members into prisoners and into wardens.
Let's face it, kids already have a lot of crap that they deal with, trying to discover who they are. It can damage their self-esteem. It can, make them isolate themselves from people. It's a constant shame. You already feel bad about, what you've done or what you've been accused of doing. And then to walk around, it's like the scarlet letter.
And like comparing it to like jail, for me, is it better than jail? Yes, but we can do much better than electronic monitoring. We could do pretrial services without surveillance. I would feel much more comfortable with a community organization, a nonprofit that serves the community, not surveilling me, not tracking me, but just checking in with me and supporting me as I go through court. There's a very big disconnect between community and law enforcement, especially communities of color. So I think we have to shift towards community-based services.
2:02 on Tuesday, August 1st, 2023. Was that the end? Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that content. And thanks again, presenters, for being here. We're going to leave it to you all to get started on this item. Ambrose, you'd like to start? Sure. Okay.
Hey everyone, my name is Ambrose Brooks S. I use they, them, and their pronouns. I'm the campaign and advocacy manager at Dignity and Power Now. And I am so grateful to get to be here with you all this morning. My testimony or statements here today are informed by a lot of research that we've been doing in partnership with the UCLA Law Criminal Justice Program, and also our work with people who have been impacted by electronic monitoring and the cycles of mass incarceration here in Los Angeles. And so what you just saw was statements from the town hall, I believe last week or the week before, from Emmett Sanders, Sheila Nadd, Anthony Robles, who spoke to their experiences on electronic monitoring pre-trial, as a young person, and post-release. And what they spoke about was, the shame that they experienced, the physical harm that they experienced by being put on a monitor, and the limitations. But what we also saw at the town hall was their vision and recommendations for what a future without electronic monitoring would look like. Anthony Robles spoke to, thinking about alternatives to pretrial incarceration that do not involve supervision, and do not involve electronic monitoring supervision. And so I'm here to speak to some findings that we have discovered through a massive national literature review that we did, is comprised of various studies from Florida, Illinois, Michigan, Cook County, San Francisco, and here in Los Angeles. So, and definitely please ask me questions after I give the testimony. So, electronic monitoring does not serve public safety, and in fact, actually, it has a criminogenic effect. So much like secured cash bail, nor that it ensures an individual's return to court. A 2017 study that reviewed all quantitative literature published on electronic monitoring since 1990 found that electronic monitoring does not have any significant effect on reducing reoffending. Studies on pretrial populations in Florida, Illinois, Michigan, Cook County, San Francisco, areas on the West Coast, and jurisdictions all across the country have all found that electronic monitoring does not reduce new criminal activity or failures to appear, and in some cases, it actually increases them substantially. In short, electronic monitoring deteriorates public safety instead of improving it. Electronic monitoring is a system designed to fail and a path right back to incarceration. Electronic monitoring actually has a net widening effect, pulling people deeper into the system as they are subject to numerous and vague conditions of supervision and thus are more likely to accrue technical violations. Electronic monitoring drives a vicious cycle of incarceration that places people behind bars for arbitrary and technical rule violations. According to the Los Angeles County Probation Department, during a 6-month period in 2022, 22% of violations were for failing to charge the device, whereas only 5% of the violations were for new arrests. We know that electronic monitoring is another form of mass incarceration that harms individuals and their communities. So as you heard from Emmett, Sheila, and Anthony, people on monitors face massive infringements on their personal autonomy and mobility in everyday life that leads to detrimental effects on employment and housing stability. Electronic monitoring requires people on monitors to attain pre-approval for any and all activities. These strict requirements severely limit autonomy and mobility because any deviation from a predetermined schedule can be considered unauthorized movement, which often leads to rearrest. Such restrictions make it impossible to do tasks as simple as taking out the trash or as essential as driving a family member to the hospital in an emergency. Electronic monitoring also jeopardizes employment and housing security by imposing restrictions that limits people's ability to secure a stable job and housing. A 2011 National Institute of Justice study of 5,000 individuals under electronic monitoring in Florida found that 22% of individuals were fired or asked to leave their job because of their electronic monitor. We also know, as Anthony Robles spoke to in the town hall, electronic monitoring is also severely harmful to mental and physical health. Anthony had broken both of his legs, as he discussed, but was unable to go to physical therapy because of the monitor that was on his ankle and the shame surrounding the monitor on his ankle. Also, the sort of irony that Anthony was subjected to an electronic monitor when he couldn't even walk. Both of his legs were broken. He was actually, bedridden, but was still subjected to electronic monitoring. Electronic monitoring makes it really difficult to respond to health emergencies. Having to go to the hospital is far more complicated when you're forced to obtain approval. And approval is also required to attend doctor's appointments, pick up medications, and undergo medical procedures. So I want to speak to electronic monitoring in LA County specifically, and this is all documented in a report by the UCLA School of Criminal Justice, UCLA School of Law Criminal Justice Program. So in LA County, what we've seen up until 2022, that's the most recent sort of data review that we've had. We have some data for 2023, and I'll speak to that in a second, but this is all leading up to 2022. And we know in LA County, electronic monitoring is far more frequently used pre-trial, so on presumptively innocent people, with 5 times as many pre-trial electronic monitoring placements as post-conviction ones. From 2015 to 2021, the county saw a 5,250% increase in pretrial electronic monitoring, skyrocketing from 24 individuals to 1,284 individuals. And we actually know as of July 18th, 2023, there's approximately 1,134 individuals on electronic monitoring in LA County. The county's 2 electronic monitoring programs so far have extremely poor outcomes. Only 65% of the people placed on pretrial electronic monitoring programs, so that is the EMP program that you'll hear about, successfully completed the program in 2020. That was down from 89% in 2016. So a 65% success rate in 2020, down from 89% in 2016. And only 45% of people in the electronic monitoring supervised release program, the SRP, successfully completed the program in 2020. The Judicial Council pretrial pilot program that began in LA County in 2020, we've seen that electronic monitoring placements have detrimental effects. So for people who are charged with misdemeanors, those who were released on their own recognizance had a failure to appear of 5%, where those on electronic monitoring had a failure to appear rate of 42%. So those released OR had a 5% failure to appear rate, those released on electronic monitoring of 42% failure to appear rate. Electronic monitoring, like all forms of mass incarceration, is disproportionately applied to Black people in Los Angeles, and it exacerbates existing inequality for women, LGBTQ+ folks, and other people of color. It's already being weaponized to discriminate against people of color in the disproportionate rates at which Black and Latinx people are placed on electronic monitoring in LA County. So in LA County in 2021, 31% of people on pretrial electronic monitoring were Black and 53% were Latinx. And lastly, as we know, when spoke to, or Emmett and Sheila and Anthony spoke to this in their testimony, LA County's electronic monitoring programs subject individuals to really stringent restrictions and surveillance. So we know that the electronic monitoring program in Los Angeles, under that program, individuals must consent to a search at any time without warrant or probable cause in their home. That's in the contract that they sign when you are hooked up to a monitor. And we know that the electronic monitoring program also requires that individuals report any changes to their schedule 24 hours in advance, but they can only do so Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Very, very limited time frame. And violations such as leaving home earlier than scheduled, failing to provide acceptable verification of work, or failing to answer telephone calls while the individual is at their residence can trigger a noncompliance report and cause a person to be reincarcerated. We also know that individuals are really limited in terms of the time that they can spend looking for employment. If they lose their job or are out of employment when they are hooked up to a monitor, there's actually a very strict requirement for the amount of time that that individual weekly can spend looking for a job. And I say all of this because we know that there are effective ways to reduce failures to appear that don't violate people's freedom in the ways that electronic monitoring does. A study by several immigrants' rights groups demonstrated the ineffectiveness of electronic monitoring in pretrial settings in comparison to programs that offer support and needed services to individuals rather than surveillance. So this study found that the lowest failure to appear rates occurred in groups that received individualized support in case management. These alternatives to electronic monitoring that provided supportive services achieved court appearance rates ranging from 97 to 99%. Even minor and easily implementable programs such as court date reminders, rides to and from court, can significantly reduce failures to appear far more than electronic monitoring has ever been able to. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that testimony. We'll leave it to Richard Giron to offer his presentation.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Commission, for this opportunity to go over some of our programs in probation. If you recall, I gave a presentation back May of 2022, so it's been more than a year now. My intent is to answer. I was given 6 questions. My intent is to go over the questions to those 6 questions and to give some updated information. There was some requests related to data, and because of the time frame, the PowerPoint is limited in data, but if you recall my last presentation, there was a lot more data. So we're willing to work with the commission. I want to thank the researchers. There is not enough research in electronic monitoring locally and at the national level. We look to partner with researchers. I think your colleague in UCLA, we've had a number of meetings, and what data requests we're open to exploring, and we're always looking to improve our operations. So I just want to start there and say thank you for the research. And I do know a lot of the data, and I do want to cover, and through the presentation, I'll make some recommendations to the commission as well. So to update and to make it not overly complicated, we do have pretrial electronic monitoring, we have adult supervision electronic monitoring, and we have juvenile electronic monitoring. So I'm going to cover adult. I have oversight of adult supervision and pretrial. Within pretrial, we have supervised release program and electronic monitoring program. And currently supervised release, so there's 270 participants. Next slide, please. And under electronic monitoring, we have 871. So the last time I was here in May of last year, those numbers combined were 1,141, and today they're at the time there were 950 when I was here in May, and now they're currently 11,041. So it's nearly a 200 increase, but it is interesting that supervised release has gone down, but electronic monitoring has gone up. So fast forward 13 months later, that's a change with the court. And to kind of go over some earlier foundation on electronic monitoring, these are alternatives to incarceration as somebody goes to court. So people go to court, their public defender, their attorneys, the DA, the court agree to releasing somebody on electronic monitoring. So if these individuals were not placed on electronic monitoring, there's a likelihood they would be in custody. So just wanted to share that with the group. AB 109 is the next group. We have currently 163 participants. That's down from 190 from my last presentation. And the 4th one is adult felony supervision cases. We currently have 12, and last year was 46. So that is some changes. The research indicate that we have post-release is a smaller number. So those numbers are trending downward. Next slide, please, are male. Of the 163, 161 are male, and we broke it down by race and age. And it's interesting that the majority of those on are of the age group 26 to 40. So it's interesting, 41 to 50 or there's 44, and over 55, there's 24. But we'll be glad to get with the commission and create a data sheet. Next slide, please. And there was questions related to the number of, next slide, please. The number of violations. There was 141 violations for charge, and there's other categories there for new arrests, absconds, tampers, failures to report, and then electronic monitoring. There was 1,493 for supervised release and pretrial electronic monitoring. The answer is no. And under electronic monitoring, the sheriff post-release program, the answer is yes. There is an agreement signed, and they are subject to search and seizures. And with AB 109 and formal probation, yes, those that are placed on felony supervision are subject to standard search and seizure conditions. Next question. Can electronic monitoring devices be used for listening devices? And all four programs, the answer is no. The current technology doesn't have the capability to record or listen to individuals. And I'll be glad to have a demonstration on the device, maybe with the subgroup. But the current technology does not allow for recording or listening to individuals while they're on electronic monitoring. Those are the questions. I'll be glad to answer any other questions from the commission.
Yeah, we're going to leave it to the last presenter, Julia Vest, to now present.
Hi, Julia Vest, Director of Community Detention, which is a community-based crime prevention program for youth. Let me know if this is close enough. So basically, I also presented at the same time as Mr. Garone about a year ago. And so this is updated information based on the last 3 months of data. And I had slightly different questions to answer. Basically, there's currently 125 youth on community detention. And just to give an overview, it's a program where the case carrying probation officer, in coordination with case plan objectives, support individualized service delivery within the youth's community. The goal is to reduce recidivism, protect victims, and support the youth remaining in their home, and rather than detaining. It's an alternative to detention. You can go to the next slide. Next 2 slides, actually. Thank you. So something that I implemented as a result of some things that I saw 4 years ago in the program is I felt that there needed to be codified the process and way that the community detention officers engage with the family and the youth. And many of them were already doing this, but I wanted it to be formally written. And so this is just an overview of some best practices that we implemented in the CDP program. And so I'll just go over a few of them, but it's to make sure that there's engagement right up front, that there's immediate, within 24 to 48 hours, contact in the home, that the youth understands what the court is expecting and wanting the youth to accomplish, and that's individualized to the youth. That there's certain agreements based on what that youth's needs are in terms of school or drug recovery, et cetera. That there's clarity regarding those expectations, because we don't want the youth to, and the family, to not understand what the expectations are and how to achieve them. And that there's clarity also regarding, what would constitute a violation of probation and could possibly lead to detention. So that goes down in the next section. The next slide, please. This section, I just wanted to talk about the coverage areas, which I covered last time, just so that you can get an idea of how far and wide the deputy probation officers go to visit folks in their home. And the caseloads since my last presentation have roughly doubled. So the caseloads have gone up, and we've noticed that referrals from the courts have increased to community detention. And I believe it's coincides with a reduction in detention. And I can say that with some confidence because I'm also over director of intake. And so I've noticed a correlation there. This next slide talks about just a snapshot over 7 caseloads of some of the crimes that led to the courts referring to CDP. And it's quite a range, but what we have noticed over the last few years is that the level of criminality, or the criteria for being placed on CDP, some of the crimes have become more serious. Under CDP, instead of being in a juvenile hall, it enables that youth to be with their family, continue with school, continue with whatever services that are assisting them to stay out of trouble. So we think it's a positive development. Next slide. And actually, you can go 2 slides. The next one's just a header. So some of the violations, I was asked to talk about some of the violations that led to us being required to detain youth. And the way this works is we usually get a court order, a minute order, that states if the youth commits any additional violations that we're to bring the youth before the court. And so this is just a list of some of those, a snapshot of some of those violations. Multiple truancies, fights at school, sometimes it's for a new offense, refusal to surrender a cell phone, gang activity, positive drug results, et cetera. But it is dependent upon the youth and what the particular commissioner or judge is wanting to see for that youth. The next slide talks about some outcomes. Over the course of the 3 months that we looked at, there was roughly 429 youth that were on CDP. And keep in mind that some of these youth, it's similar to drug recovery. It's not linear. So some of these youth came on CDP, then came off CDP, were detained, and then came back on. So some of these names doubled. But overall, it's roughly about 125 to 160 youth per month that are on CDP with LA County youth. And youth who've completed and met the requirements of the court, the completion rate was 66%, and the detention rate was 34%. Thank you.
Thank you all again for joining us and for preparing those presentations. We're going to move on to public comment, then we're going to bring it back to commissioners for discussion.
Thank you. I will echo that, Chair Jackson. Those were really great presentations. Thank you, all 3 of you. I really appreciate that. If anyone would like to make public comment in the room, please stand up to the microphone right here. Janae, if it's okay with you, I'll run the timer from up here. I think that's easier, and we'd be happy to hear you. Give me 1 second. And then please raise your hand on WebEx using the little hand icon at the bottom of the screen if you want to make a virtual comment, or if you're calling in, dial *3 on your phone. And we're going to give you 2 minutes and you can begin.
Yes, hi, good morning. My name's Eduardo Dombrique. And when I was 11 years old, I went to camp for 6 months. I went to Camp Scott. They released me and they put me on ankle monitor. I think I was on the ankle monitor for 3 months. It felt like an extra punishment. I felt like I had did my time for what I was detained for. The 3 months on ankle monitoring, it didn't seem to. It stopped me from interacting, going to school, playing with my friends. I was 11 years old, 12 years old. What I've been reading is that for the technical violations for the kids that are on the ankle monitoring, if their load runs out of battery, if they don't charge it, I'm not exactly sure what are the violations that get them in trouble as far as having to go back to court and maybe re-detained. But what I was reading is that it is often used to bring them back for technical violations. So if that's occurring, that I would ask that if we can just kind of be lenient on the children who seem to be using the ankle monitors the most.
Thank you. Just gonna let that sink in about being 11 for a minute. And actually, I think Julia can answer that question. I think let's wait until we finish public comment, but there is a policy through some of the bench officers with the courts that explains exactly what best. So I think if you could explain that as best afterwards, we'll do that. Thank you. Mr. Bell?
Morning.
Go ahead.
Just listening, watching a video and listening to everything. One, I grew up in a Black community, and growing up, I didn't know not a soul that would go to court pending jail time if they weren't monitored. That's just me. That's just how I grew up. I don't know anybody who's gonna volunteer and say, "Let me go to court so the judge can send me to jail instead of using this ankle monitor." You know, so I mean, do your research, but some of the research I feel is a little biased because I grew up in that neighborhood that you're talking about. And, you know, just it's an alternative to jail. You talk to these kids in camp, you talk to these kids in the halls, would they rather be at home on an ankle monitor or in there getting instructions from us? They would rather be home on an ankle monitor. Now, I know some people's opinion is more let them out free, let them just go willy nilly. And we talk to the victims, they're not cool with that. There's two sides to every story. There's not just the people on the ankle monitors, there's the people that's why they're on the ankle monitors. We got to think about them, safety of the community. Not everybody is those people on TV. Not everybody's going to be as good or feel the same about their crimes as they did on TV. Some people don't care. It's just facts of life.
Thanks, Thomas. Next. You can begin.
Kevin Lee, and I'm currently on the ankle monitoring for this.
You come right up to the
I'm-
mic. Thank you.
I'm currently on the ankle monitoring for the things I did, and I feel like it's a program that's that helps me show. It gives me time to myself to rethink what I did. Instead, well, I have two choices: either go to jail or place on an ankle monitoring. And being offered this, being able to choose this decision over jail is, I feel like it's like a second chance for me, because for me, if I go to jail, like a lot of things will be ruined. Like I'll have a record, or like with this ankle monitoring, if I behave myself, if I do things that I'm supposed to do, like you said, a lot of, even like just, I feel like basic charging the ankle monitoring, it's like showing responsibility that you're willing to change. You're willing to wake up every day. It's only 2 hours. You charge it once in the morning, once at night. That's it. I don't see like any point that you're missing the program because you're not charging your ankle monitor. Like there's an outlet in your house, you can charge it anywhere. You can charge it when you wake up, drink a coffee. Like there's no reason for that. And I also feel like uh the report saying being placed on ankle monitoring will lead to more court or not appearing in court. I feel like that's more like a correlation versus causation. It doesn't mean like when you're placed on an ankle monitor, it doesn't mean that you're not gonna show up to court. It's just people who are being placed on ankle monitoring, they probably have like family issues, personal issues that it's more severe than people who are not being placed on ankle monitoring, that causing them to not being able to show up on court. There's a lot of different circumstances. That doesn't mean that this program is a bad program for the future, because especially if you guys take away this kind of program in the future, young kids are gonna make mistake and they're gonna be like, oh, we don't have any consequences. We're gonna keep on making more mistakes. And if we
Thank you
don't, what's
very
gonna
much. That's your time. I really
Okay.
appreciate you being here today. Thank you for coming.
Morning, commissioners and guests. My name is Robert Kirshner. I'm a retired California Youth Authority parole agent. I was on the job from 1977 through 2006. So I've been retired about 17 years. And I'm also been a licensed private investigator since 1983. In addressing the issue of the ankle monitor, electronic monitoring, it is a tool. It's only one tool in the toolbox. I really appreciated the community detention discussion, and I very much support that. Sometimes it's necessary to monitor somebody. I actually joined you on your town hall and raised my hand, but nobody responded to me. And maybe because I put retired California Youth Authority parole agent may have been a bias at that time. The three individuals that were on that town hall, had a 43-year-old African-American female who went through a traumatic period of time, and she kept going cyclically telling the story again, but she's very successful now. So obviously something worked somewhere. You had a gentleman that did, I believe, 22 years in a prison, I believe in Illinois, if I caught that correctly. And when they brought him out, they put him on a monitor for 90 days. That's just after 22 years of incarceration. Sometimes you want to be able to keep an eye on them. And the other young man, the community activist, I don't know what his charges were. I think it was pretrial. He wasn't very clear in that. But I guess that was a traumatic experience. But I know that there's a lot of positive experiences that come out of monitoring to get people to comply and as an alternative to incarceration. And so I'm just urging, while there's a lot of research going on, people to take a look at it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I'm sorry we weren't able to get your comment at the town hall. Do we have some comments virtually? Okay, we're going to unmute the public commenters. Do you want to tell me who we're starting with? We can go ahead and call the name and see if they want to anyway, but. Oh, if you were dialing on the phone and wanted to make a public comment, please dial *3 again on your phone. That's the only way we can select you. So nobody else with a hand raised?
They're back.
Okay.
Phone number that starts with 66. We're gonna go ahead and send you a request.
You may have to dial *6 on your phone to unmute. Can you try speaking? I think you're unmuted. The caller who's raised your hand?
AC
Yes,
Ford, Local 685. Can you hear me?
we can. Please begin.
Yes, good morning. I just think that the ANCO monitoring system is a great tool. It's very necessary and it's very needed. And again, let me just say this to you all. This is another tool that you all are attempting to take away from probation. And you've taken away other tools, and you see that those decisions that you have made or contributed to have caused nothing but chaos in our institutions. We're in trouble because of all the tools that you guys continue to take. And here we are today, you're talking about taking away the ankle monitoring. It's just going to be a disaster. And I think you need to bring in the victims and allow the victims participate in these sessions so that they can give their perspective on how they feel about some of these decisions and some of these motions that you guys continue to make. Thank you.
Is that it, Janae? Okay.
Alicia Varani, we sent you a request.
Everyone hear me? Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay, hi. This is Alicia Varani from UCLA School of Law's Criminal Justice Program. I just wanted to, state that I think it's really important that, as Ambrose talked about, we look at the research around electronic monitoring. In most fields, we would look at data and research to understand what actually works to keep communities safe. And there's just no conclusive research that shows that electronic monitoring prevents rearrest or encourages return to court, which are the things that courts care about. And so I understand that people are very concerned about community safety, but we really need to look to what works and the data. We have proven solutions. We have a mandate to create a pretrial services agency that's independent of law enforcement, that's supportive. And I think it's really important to listen to the stories of the people that were reflected in the town hall. We're currently engaging in a interview project of people who have been on the ankle monitor in Los Angeles County, and the overwhelming evidence is showing us that people do not want to be on the ankle monitor. They want to be at freedom. The overwhelming feelings of shame, of being afraid, of constantly looking over one's shoulders are some of the findings that we're coming upon. And I also would just love to ask a question. It's very concerning that the rates of electronic monitoring are increasing in Los Angeles County without a lot of data transparency and without the demographics. So I'd love to know how probation can be more transparent around this data, and also the concerns around the technical violations and what probation is doing about those. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we have one final commenter, which is Krista Newble. We'll unmute you, Krista. Sorry. Ready? Krista, can we hear you? You may need to unmute yourself. Does it show up as unmuted, Janae? Krista, can you try speaking? If you're on the phone and you can dial *6, that's great. Or you may just need to click the unmute button. Okay, we have another one. Janet. So we'll come back to you, Krista. We'll go to Janet next. Janet, we'll send you an unmute request.
EM deprives presumptively innocent people of their fundamental
I'm going to interrupt you because we missed the first few words of your comment. I haven't started your time yet. Can you start your comment again, please, Janet?
Yes, thank you. EM deprives presumptively innocent people of their fundamental right to liberty. It should only be used as the most restrictive placement option. Electronic monitoring is not an alternative to incarceration, but another form of it. There's no evidence that EM is effective. It's the exact opposite. There's substantial evidence that EM increases the chance of rearrest, increases FTAs, and perpetuates a cycle of mass incarceration. Electronic monitoring perpetuates racial and economic disparities, imposes a burden on municipalities and on supervision. It raises serious privacy concerns. EM makes people prisoners in their own homes and adds so many restrictions that just surviving becomes almost impossible. These highly limiting punitive restrictions must be reflected as such by treating EM as the most restrictive condition of release based on the understanding that EM is tantamount to a digital jail. It's time we implement genuine solutions by providing housing, treatment, mental health support, court date reminders, and other types of services that lead to radical improvements in the life of those who are criminalized by the legal system and actually helps them. Electronic monitoring is not a service, it's a punishment. It's a particularly harmful extension of pretrial incarceration and not an alternative to it. There's no reason that anyone charged with a misdemeanor should be subjected to such policing when they otherwise would have been released on their own recognizance with standard monitoring. Electronic monitoring should be treated as invasive, restrictive digital prison that it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go, are we going to go back to Krista? Krista, can you try? Okay, great. You can be, yep, you can begin.
Okay, I just had like two comments. One was that it seems like probation is being held accountable again for putting kids on monitoring, but in actuality, that's the judges that do that. And so I'm just curious, at what point are you guys going to bring bench officers in or have a meeting with bench officers to share these concerns, because they're the ones who make that final decision, as well as when we talk about the, I guess we're going to call recidivism or technical violations, or when they go back in, those are also mostly from the judges, because on the minute order, it will say violate on the first offense. Those are things that you should take up with the judges in these causes as far as having extra time, giving chances, because those are actual orders on the minute order. So again, I think you should bring the bench officers into these conversations because probation has no control over this area in which we're trying to deem unfair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got Yvette. Janae, how many more hands do we have raised?
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Yvette.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Yvette Leader. I'm the executive director of La Defensa. We focus around issues of pretrial incarceration and have been in deep partnership with community members and researchers, academics, impacted folks that have gone through the experience of electronic monitoring. And all of the research shows, like Janet mentioned before, that EM is not effective. We are talking about legally innocent people, folks that have not been convicted. And state direction, state policy directs counties to use electronic monitoring as the most restrictive condition. The Alternatives to Incarceration Final Workgroup Report, which was a document developed by county representatives and the community, also recommends that electronic monitoring be used as the least restrictive condition in alignment with state policy. And yet what we've been seeing is an increase of over 5,000%, 5,000% of the use of electronic monitoring. This is costly to our county. So although, like the previous speaker named, judges play a role, so does the county. So long as we are using our county dollars to fund the use of electronic monitoring for folks that are not convicted. I think this is an important point for you all to consider. We're talking about legally innocent people. We are using county resources that can be better spent on providing supportive services. If the goal is to ensure that someone returns to court, let's fund transportation. Let's fund childcare. All of the recommendations that are currently being uplifted in the county for their new pretrial processes. Judges are in alignment with more resources to ensure that folks return to court. We need to break from this false binary that it's either incarceration or electronic monitoring. When we are talking about legally innocent people, that if they receive text message reminders, like we saw the research out of DC, when they implemented text message reminders, there was over 80% return to court rate. We should really be looking at the data because the data points to better ways of ensuring folks return to court that are focused on resourcing. And the idea that probation doesn't play a role in electronic monitoring is absurd. Probation does provide recommendations to the courts. Probation has a vested interest in electronic
Thank you,
monitoring.
Yvette. That's your time. Thank you very much for your participation. I think we have one caller who's trying to speak. Do they have their hand raised now? Okay, great. I think you need to dial *6 on your phone to unmute yourself.
My name is Nika. I just wanted to follow up by saying that actually satellite tracking of people, which is the vendor that LA County has chosen to pay for electronic monitoring, within that contract, the county is currently paying for that vendor to send court date hearing reminders. The inability and lack of evidence, not only on the data from this contract, which has been renewed again and again and again, the lack of transparency, the lack of ability to understand whether or not the vendor is sending those court date reminders, which I believe we can all agree that there's no way that is happening, is leading not only to more business for satellite tracking of people, a subsidiary of Securus Technologies, a company that is owned by Tom Gores, the billionaire who lives in Beverly Hills and owns private Detroit prisons, has a perpetual line to a contract with the county because there's a demand for more and more of its service. I also want to mention this is the exact same vendor that the county just agreed to move away from by making phone calls in LA County jails free. So if we understand the slow progress towards that commitment and the slow progress to move away from electronic monitoring, which time and time again is proven not to work, must be understood who is making profit and who is benefiting from this system and what network of people are they in. I also want to raise the fact that within 3 business days of when this contract was signed, there was supposed to be a report on the outcomes of it, an evaluation of how it was decided upon to give this vendor more and more county dollars. I also want to say that what will happen with the data from the contract, from the people who participate in electronic monitoring, is that it will be available, this is a quote on page 71 of the contract, it will be available to law enforcement for criminal behavioral analysis, which will feed into predictive policing and risk assessments. These are the exact tools that the county in the ATI roadmap has committed to moving away from. And this contract and this decision for electronic monitoring represents an exact reneging of that commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all of our callers. Yes? Okay, I'll go back to you.
All righty, thank you all for commenting. The diversity of perspectives is certainly welcome and appreciated. I'm going to leave it to commissioners to chime in with any questions or comments you have about relating to the courts. Yeah. Julie, if you'd like to speak to that.
Just to clarify, there were two comments that had questions about the detain on first rules. If you could just help explain how that interacts with
Sure.
probation's community detention program.
Okay, yes. So the technical violations, I listed some in my presentation, just so you can get an idea of some of the ways that youth have to be brought back to court. And basically, the way it works is when a youth is placed on CDP, we receive court documentation, or what's called minute order, that will either indicate the things that we need to attend to individually, or it will say language detain on first. And what that means is that we have to, as probation officers, we have to go and either ask the youth to self-surrender, or we have to go and pick up the youth to bring before the court. And detain on first means detain on first violation. So it can be pretty strict, but we are required to follow the court's orders.
Sure, Commissioner Garcia-Leyes.
So I wanted to ask you specifically about that. So hearing Ms. Newble and several other comments on, is this probation? Is this the court? Is this the DA? The detain on first does probation department ever recommend that a detain on first should be added to the minute order? Do the DAs usually recommend that? Do judges do that sua sponte on their own? Can probation recommend that that not be placed in the minutes?
I'll start with the last question. We have had some attempts by my supervisors to have discussions with commissioners around this when it we first started seeing it. Because if you look historically, before I came, I was told that this was not a general practice by commissioners to put this on minute orders, that it was left up to the discretion of the CDP officer, who has the relationship, sees the whole picture, right? They go to the home, they go to the school, they talk to the teachers, and that there was a shift that happened a few years ago. And so there was initially some attempt by a couple of my supervisors to try and have a discussion around that. But they didn't get very far with that. And so, and we're very careful because we don't want to be disrespectful to the courts. So that to answer your last question, but in terms of who refers it, our experience of it is that it is coming from the bench officers. Was there another question I missed? I can't remember.
No, that answered it.
Okay.
Commissioner Mundo?
Let me just clarify something. I actually preceded Julia Vest in IDC, and Violate on First has been around since at least 2014, 2015. And it was such a problem that it actually accounted for 20% of intake. 20% when intake was triple what it is today. And so just to clarify, it's something that bench officers have been doing for a long, long time.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Mundo. Vice Chair Kakani.
Okay, so I have a number of questions. I'll start related to the adult side of things. I'm looking at this packet, these slides that were provided, and listening to your presentation that specific client demographics are not tracked. Is that a current thing? Because in looking at the report from UCLA, it's very clear that at least from 2015 to 2021, there is demographic data related to the number of Black, Latinx, white folks that are currently subjected to pretrial electronic monitoring, also related to gender. So just if you could clarify.
Sure. I mean, for this presentation, we weren't able to pull it, but we have provided it to UCLA, and we'll be glad to provide it to the commission as well.
So it is tracked. It's just that.
Well, it's available. We have it. There's a case report, so we do pull it from a number of reports.
But the probation department doesn't currently track that data to
No.
check trends or anything of that nature. Okay. And then related to these, especially the pretrial stuff, just lifting up what Yvette shared, that these are legally innocent folks, right? That we are monitoring in this way and surveilling in this way. Is there any data on the offenses? I don't know if I missed that in here, but data on the offenses where this is either recommended by probation or ordered by the court?
Yes, so I would like to get back with the commission and you tell us what reports you'd like to see. But I've yet to see something like offense-driven. So that's just one example. And so we could create a data sheet with more layers to it.
Okay. Okay, and then for Ms. Vest, is that right? Vest, okay. So just confirming though, I know that there was comments that probation doesn't have really anything to do or any control over community detention. But is it a recommendation that probation officers make as part of their, I forget what the report is called here in LA?
Yeah, there are case carrying probation officers that do recommend CDP. There's also sometimes recommendations made at intake.
Right, okay.
But from my last presentation, I didn't bring that data with me, but I remember the data points. There was, most of the referrals are coming from the court. I think there was around 6% or 8% coming from intake.
Is there a way for, that data though is available? You would be able to provide that
Yes.
if it was requested?
Yes.
Okay. And is there data on the detain on first kind of recommendations as well? Like how many times courts are ordering that, and then how many times a young person is then brought in as a result of that?
Yes, we could get that data. I know just in terms of looking at the number of courts, I've asked my supervisors to give me a list of the courts that regularly put that on the minute order, and it's 8 out of the 10. So it's pretty high. But in terms of individual courts, there are times when individual commissioners will not put that on the minute order for a particular youth. So it's not, like let's say we take one court, it's not every single time.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then the presentation that you shared doesn't contain any demographic data. Is that something that you would also be able to share or that you have access to?
Yes.
And then also just related to that data ask, is there data related to like pretrial recommendations for CDP and what offenses? I mean, I know that you shared kind of a sampling.
Yes, and actually we were asked to provide that at the last presentation, and so I had a graph that showed pre-dispo and post.
Yeah.
I wasn't asked for that this time,
Okay.
so I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
But yeah, I can provide that.
Okay. And then is there any sort of like manual or I don't know, like training guide? And I only ask because as I'm reading kind of the violations that led to detention, right? Some of these feel wildly arbitrary, like multiple truancies.
Mhm.
Is multiple 3s, multiple 5s, multiple 7, 2?
It's dependent on the minute order. So if it's a detain on first, then it would be right away.
Sure.
If it's not, then it would be, based on the discretion of the CDP officer, what the parents are saying in terms of, sometimes it's parent error that led to the youth being late to school. So it's a discussion that would happen in the home with the whole family. If
But-
it's truancy you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, just reading the first bullet point, but so then
Right.
it's a little bit subjective, kind of when a
In
young
those
person is
instances-
violated.
Well, in those instances when we can use our discretion in our relationship, it's rare currently, but yeah, in those instances when we can, we do.
Okay. And yeah, just sorry, I'm just reading some of these other ones again. Just wanted to name how arbitrary some of them feel or sound. Just argumentative with PO. Like, what does I don't know what that means. My kids are argumentative with me all the time. So just is there like some sort of standard or like a definition of what it means to be argumentative, or is that just also like a gut check from the PO?
Well, we have the best practices in terms of our training of CDP officers to try to engage and try to show grace at all times with the families and to try and talk with the parents about what, some of those obstacles are to some of that behavior. But I would have to look at that particular case. I just took a snapshot because I know that I was asked to give an example of some of the technical violations. But yeah, I would need to look at that particular case to know more.
Okay. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that, probation was kind of moving away from at least detention as it relates to kind of these like technical violations, or I don't know, like whether on first glance, right, someone would be recommended for detention for truancy or smoking on school grounds if they were brought to court for that as part of like an initial petition.
Absolutely, yeah. And we, for the most part, are not recommending detention. We're following the orders of the court. We're trying to have influence. We're trying to write a report that's comprehensive so they can see the full picture. But we still, if we have it detained on first, we have to follow it.
Right. Yeah, I guess if there could be some distinction created in like the data that's provided, I don't know how that can be done, but just in terms of like when detain on first results in an incarceration or a detention versus kind of like a seemingly subjective recommendation, or I don't even know what the correct term is, like whether like the PO determines that this is a violation and then brings a young person back, because I don't know, maybe argumentative with PO is something that's connected to detention on first. Sorry, what was it called? Detain on first. But I don't know if that's more connected to just like something that's created by the PO, like an expectation or something of that nature. And then last question I had was or actually I have two last questions. There's like an engagement section in here.
Yes.
Yeah. And it says added conditions will be explained. And what are you talking about? Conditions that are being added by the PO, or what added conditions are we?
No, so for example, if youth, there's like a standard list of conditions typically, but sometimes the court will add conditions if a youth has a drug issue that they want them to follow up on, or if the judge is stating detain on first, we have to explain that to the family so they understand what that means. So just, it prompts us to have a more in-depth discussion with the family.
Okay. And yeah, my last ask is really, I imagine that this is not the full extent of like the training manual and the
No.
best practices and all of that. I think if that could be provided, that would be incredibly helpful. Just to kind of get a better sense of, yeah, how folks are trained and how it's being implemented.
Okay.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Canales?
Thank you, Chair Jackson. Yes, I just want to say, as we look into this, I'm not here to take anybody that is incarcerated to take their choices away. But I do think that it's important that we ask questions, that we look into why there's over 1,000 violations for batteries. And I do have one question about this report right here. I noticed that it has Buena Park, Placencia, Yorba Linda, Fullerton, and those are all Orange County. But does LA County also have jurisdiction over these areas?
We have the cities that are listed, yes, we do visit families in those areas.
Oh, it really threw me off guard. I didn't realize that. My nephew committed suicide in Buena Park while on electronic monitoring. And I always used to say, but that's not LA County, that was Orange County. And it became so invasive in his life, where they made his life impossible he had a girlfriend, and although that weakness of suicide should not be acceptable, and I understand that, and that's not to be, it just threw me off when I saw Buena Park there. And I'm sorry. I was not expecting. Shit. But I'm so sorry. And I just wanted to ask Ambrose, in your presentation, is there any more requests for data that you've been? I didn't know.
Please excuse Commissioner Canales and allow her some time. We can revisit that if she'd like to. Other commissioners? Commissioner Terry?
Just to clarify that it's if the youth is living in this area but committed the crime in Los Angeles. To her question regarding.
That would explain jurisdiction.
Yes.
Okay, that was quite disorienting, but we will move things along as long as commissioners don't have any further comment. Do you?
I do.
Okay.
So I don't. Yeah. I don't want to give a lecture on the subject, but I feel like there's a lot of things that weren't said. And so keeping in mind our public audience, there are a few things that I just want to share. So I think everybody agrees that this is a tool that was brought up several times. The question, and I think what most of us on the commission are considering, is when is it the best tool for the job? And how do we make sure that it's used then and not used when it is not the best tool? So I also have many clients and people I grew up with, and I've had my own court dates in my youth and have not wanted to go, and have known people who haven't gone. But we've seen a lot of pretrial support services that are more effective because, yeah, I didn't want to go to my court dates. Most people don't want to go to their court dates. But when you're really reminded the option is a bench warrant or going to your court date, and you add to that, I will remind you, I will have a child care, I will come pick you up. You know, please don't screw this up for yourself or make things worse. That actually is more effective a lot of times at getting people to show up than is pretrial monitoring. So that's why we're considering and asking the question, is electronic monitoring in pretrial the best? Because we know these other things actually work, even if it is because of the threat of a bench warrant. So the other thing that's not been brought up at all is the overwhelming changes that California has promised to make and have not yet realized to pretrial detention. So probation is one small player in this bigger change and move away from money bail. And so we need to be thinking about the adult pretrial services within the context of that larger change, which is much bigger than probation, but in which probation is a part of. I also want to make a clear distinction between, so adult as an alternative to incarceration post-conviction. And that's what Commissioner Canales was saying, not wanting to take away anybody's choices. One thing I thought, and I've always looked for, is I've wondered if house arrest is disproportionately offered to white defendants. And I think I heard a lot in the discussion, this assumption that if more people of color are on monitoring, at least post-conviction, that's an evidence of racism in the system. I actually was thinking just the opposite, that if only white people get sent home and people of color remain locked up, that would be the evidence of racism. So the issue of racism and detention and alternatives to incarceration are much more complicated than maybe some of the comments I was hearing. And then finally, I wanted to separate this from the youth issue. So it's a whole separate set of laws and policies involving incarceration of youth. And I'm of the mind still that if this is a tool that would enable us to reduce the population at Los Padrinos, we need to pursue it more, frankly, regardless of whether or not it works, because it couldn't possibly be worse than what's happening at Los Padrinos. And then, oh, and the last is the issue of net widening. So I think what we've heard, especially with the youth, is what may be happening is both. It is an alternative to incarceration and there is net widening happening. And I think it seems to be an alternative to incarceration, looking at the seriousness of the offenses, but net widening when looking at the increasing numbers. And net widening, for people in the public who don't know what we're talking about, means rather than people who would currently be incarcerated are on electronic monitoring, that rather what's happening is that all those people who would have been incarcerated are still being incarcerated, and a whole nother group of people are subject to electronic monitoring who would have otherwise not been subject to any restrictions. And I would really hope that the department makes net widening, understanding net widening a top priority. So rather than hearing from us particular data requests, what I would hope that the department would do is figure out what data it needs to collect that maybe it doesn't collect. How do we measure net widening? And how do we look at recidivism and the safety results? You know, the commission can ask for data, but we don't have really the capabilities of a UCLA or access to the unrestricted data or the ability to collect the data the way the department has. So I would hope the department would make a goal for itself of understanding whether or not net widening is occurring and whether or not there's a public safety benefit to these programs, so that that sort of actual recommendation or usable conclusions could be made rather than just trying to provide raw data to people who may not be able to process it and it's not what we want. And, you know, but I would love to see conclusions from the probation department. It's been my big criticism of the bench that they seem completely unconcerned with whether or not anything they do works. And that's also a criticism I think that is fairly offered to or leveled at the department a lot of times too. So that's all I had to say. Thanks.
All you had to say was great. So thank you for that. I appreciate you kind of like reminding us that, yes, this is being framed as a tool, but what we're losing, or maybe what some of us are losing in the effectiveness is what's in question. And that's what we're trying to better gauge. And I think having access to data to analyze the effectiveness of this program is what we need. Sounds like this information, a lot of it is available and there's a willingness to provide that to us. We appreciate that. I am going to make a formal request for some of this not some of it, as much of it as you can provide. My question though first is, Commissioner Kakani, have you looked at the data request? Does it include all of the things that it doesn't? Okay, so I think I want to wait to make the motion then, because that would be based on this. Okay, because I don't plan on reading this. Okay. It's pretty exhaustive. So, okay, so I'll do this. I will make a motion, and then anything that Commissioner Connie wants to add to that motion, Wendy will help me with that. Yes? Okay, so
Are we done with the discussion, or is this just in the middle? Because I know Commissioner Terry had questions and I have a couple questions for the presenter. So is it?
yeah, the motion doesn't conclude the agenda item. It's just one thing that it's a business that needs to be done. What's that? Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'd like to make a formal motion to the probation department to provide the data that is included in this sheet that is attached to the agenda. It's going to be modified, but this is just maybe a general request to provide all the data around electronic monitoring. Is it as simple as that, or?
Yes, except that it's not attached to the agenda yet, but it will be. So, and we will provide it in writing to you so that you have a copy of it.
The request would be much more buttoned up. You'll have all the specifics that we need in order to move along. So that's considered the first motion. Does any other commissioner want to second that? Okay. Have all the commissioners had an opportunity to review the request? And you're aware of what it contains, the headers of each request?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, so would you like to take a moment to just kind of review it?
Thank you.
You would, like the entire thing? Because some of the subtopics are repetitive. So maybe we just need to read the headers. Okay, okay. I like it. Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, sorry, everyone. For ease of informing the public, I'm just going to take a moment to read the detailed data list that the commission has in front of them so that all are aware of what's on it, as it'll be included in the motion. Point 1, how many adults have been placed on EMP and EM via SRP from November 1, 2021 through to the present? Break down the numbers by race, gender, age, pretrial, post-conviction, EM versus alcohol monitoring or SCRAM, SCRAM. Any failures to appear the individual has had while on this grant of EM. Courthouse that issued EM, number of days on EM, charge level, misdemeanor or felony, charge type, specific code section, final disposition or outcome of the case. Point 2, how many violations have been issued for adults placed on EMP and EM via SRP from November 1, 2021 through to the present? Break down the numbers by race, gender, age, pretrial, post-conviction, any failures to appear the individuals had while on this grant of EM, type of violation, result of the violation, if reincarcerated, the number of days in jail for the violation and outcome of the case. For curfew violations, please provide the exact type of curfew violation. Point 3, how many minors have been placed on EM from January 1, 2021 through to the present? Break down these numbers by race, gender, age, pre-adjudication, post-disposition, EM versus alcohol monitoring or SCRAM, any failures to appear the individual has had while on this grant of EM, courthouse that issued EM, number of days on EM, charge level, misdemeanor or felony, charge type, specific code section, final disposition or outcome of the case. Point 4, how many violations have been issued for minors placed on EM from January 1, 2021 through to the present? Break down these numbers by race, gender, age, pre-adjudication, post-disposition, any failures to appear the individuals had while on this grant of EM, type of violation, result of the violation, if reincarcerated, the number of days incarcerated for the violation and outcome of the case. For curfew violations, please provide the exact type of curfew violation. Please provide any electronic monitoring fees collected from adults on the monitor from January 1, 2021 through to the present. Please provide any electronic monitoring fees collected from minors on the monitor from January 1, 2021 through to the present. Different section 2. Now that they are aware of the failure to charge the device constitutes the greatest number of violations in the EMP program, what does probation plan to do to rectify this so that people are not being violated for this reason? Next question, what steps, if any, has probation taken to amend the EM contract so that 1, individuals have greater amount of time in the week to seek employment, and 2, individuals don't have to provide as much advance notice if their work schedule or other schedules change? Question 4, what steps, if any, has probation taken to change their policy on absconding from 4 hours to 48 hours so that people who are unreachable for only 4 hours are not being violated as having absconded? Question 5, what steps, if any, has probation taken to remove the search and seizure condition that is automatically imposed on everyone who is ordered to pretrial EM? Question 6, ongoing request for the probation department to adopt a policy that they will regularly, every 30 days, review people on EM, and remove people from EM if there has been compliance with the EM program with no additional court hearing needed. Question 7, ongoing request for the probation department to publish all of this EM data on a quarterly basis. Question 8, what is the capacity for the EM devices to be used as listening devices? Even if the function is turned off, do the devices have the capability to listen? And those are the questions presented in the electronic monitoring data request.
Thank you, Stephen. And so that document has now been uploaded to the agenda, so the public can now see it attached under this item. Is that true, Janae? It will be. The Wi-Fi is running a little bit slowly. And we will also provide it to you all. And then I'm going to read in the list of items that Commissioner Kakani has asked to include on the youth side. And Ms. Vest, don't worry about writing this down. We'll send it to you in writing as well. So that includes the data around the percentage of recommendations to CDP made by probation. That's the data that was provided before, so an update on that data. The average length of time youth spend on CDP. The detain on first data, including the number of courts that do it and how often the violations result in detain on first. The demographic data, including race, ethnicity, gender, SOGI status, and pre and post dispo status. The manual or training guide for the CDP program, and then adding in the number of young people on predisposition CDP who have their case dismissed. Got it?
Thank you. Impressive that you were able to capture that, Wendy, and County Council. Thank you for initiating that and for itemizing the request. I'd like for you all to accept that as the formal request for information. And that's the first motion. Can I have a commissioner second that based on what we just heard?
I'll second that.
All right, seconded by Commissioner Kakani. We'd like to move forward with a vote from commissioners.
I think we need to ask if there's any discussion on the motion from commissioners.
Any discussion about this? Commissioner Mundo?
So I'm sitting here wondering, how much closer do we get from receiving our basic data when we keep driving and adding data that is so, it's minutia. Had the department already responded with some of our data requests, we would have most of our answers. All we're doing now is asking them to put more. That won't change what we get from the original data. This data has been in place since 2018, before even this commission existed. I'm not sure what we gain by adding another request. What do we get? Do we get them the opportunity to delay more because now we've asked them for more? For data that, to figure out how many people were violated and how we determine the discretion used when somebody violates a kid for 4 tardies rather than 3. What do we get? I really think that we're starting to cross over from oversight to micromanaging a department that's trying to deal with the crisis. And I just implore my colleagues to be thoughtful about the number of requests we have out there and the number of requests that have not been satisfied.
Richard and Julie, do you guys have any thoughts about being able to furnish the types of data that we're asking for, and especially in a timely manner so that we can sort of look at this issue of effectiveness?
I'm hearing the data request for the first time, so I like to have some time to look at it, how quickly we could turn it around. But it is pretty expensive in the time frame. The time frames and the level of detail. But So I'm asking for some time to tell you how feasible, how quickly we could turn it around.
Yeah, if you just glanced at the sheet right there, that request, based on what you already collect and what you see there, is there a vast difference between the two? Sounds like there's quite a bit of information that you guys are already collecting, but maybe we have not made the sufficient request to be able to get that in time.
Well, there's some detail that we don't necessarily capture. So it's going to take some work, like misdemeanor versus felony, court locations. Again, I need some more time to review it, but many of the data, what we have, we'll be glad to present as quickly as we can. But a lot of this we don't track, so we'll have to pull it, and it's going to take some time.
Okay, thank you.
If I could add, one of the things that Dr. Gongora and I have done over the last year or so is after a request is made like this in an official meeting, meet informally with probation to go over the request and remove, adjust, edit certain elements that are particularly burdensome and without a big payoff. So that's certainly something I would offer to do if you wished for me to do that, and then report back to you about what elements Mr. Hiron says are easy and which elements are doable but difficult and which elements are really not doable. If I can offer to provide that, if that would help.
Thank you. Now, Commissioner Mundo, I do agree that this list is pretty extensive and it may make it impossible for probation to get this information back to us, especially in a timely manner. But I do think that it is our duty as an oversight body to request the information, regardless of their capacity to be able to provide it. What distinguishes micromanaging from oversight? Where is that fine line between where information should not be asked for and where it should?
I don't know. It just feels that. I mean, it just feels like we're really just at the point where we're basically telling them to collect everything. And not everything is necessary. And I tell you, if we had that DND log, we would have a great picture of the system. And I just think this puts us further away from that.
Okay, do you think that a program should be maintained without us knowing if it works or not?
That's a whole different question, because this data is just going to tell us what they do, not how it works.
So should the list be reexamined? That's the question. Should we reconsider this? Should it be simplified? Because this doesn't go away, but maybe it's modified so that we can get the result that we want, because we do need information.
Maybe we can just gather all the requests we have, look at them together, and basically reduce it to what really is necessary and really is essential.
Okay. We are willing to turn this into a sort of a subcommittee mission. And so we can do this in a much more streamlined way. Obviously, we want to work smarter, not harder. We want results. So does this mean that I retract my motion, County Council? Because I don't want to move forward with this particular list, even though I think we've got to backtrack a little bit here.
I think technically the motion has been made, but I think you do have a second. So I think you actually now have to take a vote. Then nothing stops the commissioners, those from voting no, and then presenting this in a different way, essentially saying you want to bring it back and have it agendized for the next meeting. That's totally an option. But I think you do actually have to answer yes or no once you've had the second.
Okay, let's tie that end. So I am going to,
I just wanted to make a comment and respond
Yeah,
really
yeah.
quickly. The issue of state surveillance to me does not feel like one of minutia, right? We spend millions of dollars on surveilling, incarcerating, supervising people without any sort of accountability for the systems that kind of create these consequences and these situations. And this idea that probation is in a place of crisis and therefore we shouldn't be asking for this information doesn't feel terribly fair for the folks who are experiencing this, for the folks who are on electronic monitoring, for Commissioner Canales' nephew. Like, this is not some small issue. This is not minutia. We spend $1 billion to fund the probation department. We should be able to ask these questions. We should be able to get this data. Whether probation chooses to answer, whether they choose not to collect that data, we have an obligation to the public who is subject to these forms of surveillance. We have an obligation to the public who spends their tax, or who don't really have a choice, but whose tax dollars go to these institutions and these systems. So I don't know. I disagree with this idea of breaking this down, streamlining it. I think this is incredibly straightforward. And if anyone, I don't know if folks have taken the time to read Ms. Varani's report on pretrial electronic monitoring, but the story that it tells is one that makes me think that every single one of these asks, and then some, are incredibly vital. So I just putting that out there.
So I agree. And today Commissioner Lays taught me something, net whining. We always talk about the public, but in this arena, we make it a small group. Mr. Lito Day spoke about the positives of surveillance. And I can guarantee you that a lot of individuals who would be incarcerated would talk about it. I get that. The issue is the minutia. It's the data we're asking. And, you know, I try not to be emotional about this because this is serious stuff. It takes a controlled emotion to be on a board like this and to make decisions that actually get us somewhere. And so I apologize if you think that I think the issue is minutia. I do not. I think it's a serious issue. And I think that the bench officers should be here explaining their use of it. But for today's purpose, I just think that this request just gets us further away from where we have to be.
So what I believe is that part of this compromise, right, and modifying the request, maybe streamlining it, as I said, was accepting sort of some of the limitations that come with working with probation. We got to be realistic about what our experiences have been, and we just don't get what we need most of the time. So is there a way for us to not eliminate this entire thing, but for the sake of getting timely information, is there a way to streamline this so that we can move that along, and then maybe at a later date, this could be like an outstanding request and have a deadline associated with it, not months long, but a reasonable timeline to be able to gather all of these things, but maybe in the near future, there's a way to sort of reduce this a little bit for the sake of getting what we need. Is that reasonable, Commissioner Kakani? No? Yeah. Well, we have to vote anyway, so it's going to be everyone's choice to sort of vote in favor of kind of coming back to this, or so yeah, let's just do that. Unless there's more discussion on this.
Just a clarifying question. So if we're saying no, not this current list, we're saying yes to having a soon to come follow-up meeting to kind of narrow it down?
So Wendy is going to facilitate the vote.
Just to be clear, Stephen has added that we could vote on this and then vote on a second motion to follow up with this, either to re-agendize or create a subcommittee or whatever you want. Yes. Okay. Yes.
So this is, I'm understanding this is a motion that was put forward to request more data. Is there a timeline with it, or we're just submitting a motion with no timeline, or how is that working? Do we know?
There was not a timeline included in the original motion.
And right now, we're still waiting on more data that we've requested and have not received.
There are some pending data requests.
How long have we been waiting on the other data?
There are a number of pieces of data that we are waiting on, either in its entirety or partially. It's been partially completed.
Mhm.
I will say I'm actually going to report on this later in this meeting. There has been tremendous movement over the last 3 weeks in providing some of that long-awaited data that I think is attributable to the new leadership team. So I'm feeling optimistic. I'm never one to actually argue with Commissioner Mundo about the need for timely data and focusing on data, but there has been movement, very positive movement. So there are outlying requests, and actually what Commissioner Mundo suggested about putting together kind of a very specific list of those is something staff is working on. So if you chose to delegate this to a small group of commissioners, we certainly could do that along with this request.
Okay, thank you.
And I will, I'm not going to read the whole list, but I will clarify what we're voting on before we do that for you, Commissioner Canales, and the rest of the group. Yes? I'm looking at Sarah and Donisha. The number is low. The question was about outstanding data requests. It's I'm going to repeat what Sarah just said for the virtual audience. So there are pieces of data that are missing. We have had a recent influx of response to our data requests. So most of the requests are at least partially fulfilled. In fact, we're very close to saying that all of the requests are at least partially fulfilled. And we are very hopeful that they will all be fulfilled shortly. So the motion that we're voting on is the list that is now attached to the agenda and that commissioners have seen of the data request on electronic monitoring, and then including a short list of additional data points on youth community detention program that include things like the CDP recommendations from probation, the average length of time detained on first data, demographic data, manual and training guide, and number of predisposition cases that are dismissed. Commissioner Canales, those are the ones that are not written on your list. So you can vote yes or no on that motion. Commissioner Canales?
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia-Lays?
No.
Commissioner Kakani?
Yes.
Commissioner Mundo?
No.
Commissioner Terry?
No.
And Commissioner Jackson? Okay, so the motion fails.
Okay, thank you guys for that exercise. We are moving on. Actually, we're going to excuse the presenter. Oh, no. There's more discussion. Is there more discussion on this item? I don't want to close things. In this moment? Yes? Okay. Volunteers for the subcommittee? Motion this, motion that. Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we create an ad hoc committee to evaluate this and other existing data requests with the goal of rethinking our approach to collecting data in light of what we've been given, what we're able to use, and how we can better make data requests in the future.
I second that motion. Discussion? Commissioners? Commissioner Canales?
Thank you so much, Chair Jackson. I just want to say, because I got cut off in sharing last time, that did catch me off guard, and I was not expecting that. I have spoken about my nephew with full composure. It was, just when I saw Buena Park. And I want to acknowledge the gentleman that spoke of his positive experience. And as I said, not to take somebody else's choice away. But, then when we were outside, I heard another story about somebody's Chucky doll getting thrown out the window and set on fire and saying, go catch it. And you can't because you're on electronic monitoring. So, and that's why, even though this list is very extensive, And I do see a shift in how we are getting data now in a positive way. I want to acknowledge that probation does seem to be moving forward, working with us. I definitely want to, I've been seeing, reports from Wendy, and I appreciate that. But I feel that, that it is important that we know what's going on, with those that are being monitored in the positive ways and in the negative ways, because then that's how we reach solutions. And that's why, even though the civ, I feel until we start getting some of these answers, we can still have the experiences of, those that went terribly wrong. And but I do want to acknowledge the data that we have been getting so far. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I would just add that I always appreciate discussion because I think the commissioners have an amazing way of shifting perspective, and some of that is about that. You know what I mean? It's not about having a fixed way of seeing things. And I just think that as commissioners, we do have to make sure that we're always being really intentful about what we do and how we do it. And it's okay to be able to take a step back and say, let's rethink how we're doing this and resubmit it in the most effective way for, again, effective results. So I think that everything in this itemization is valid and important, and we still need to collect it, but I just don't have a problem with going back to the drawing board and saying, what are we asking for? So I just wanted to say that to better justify my position on this particular item in this motion. Yes, sorry. Subcommittee.
Okay, so we're going to vote on the creation of an ad hoc subcommittee to evaluate this data request and the other outstanding data requests. Motion made by Commissioner Garcia-Leyes, seconded by Chair Jackson. Please vote yes or no. Commissioner Canales?
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia-Leyes?
Yes.
Commissioner Kakani? Yes. Commissioner Mundo?
Yes.
Commissioner Terry?
Yes.
And Commissioner Jackson. So that motion passes unanimously, and I actually can't remember what the bylaws say about whether we need to assign those committee members today or whether that's up to Chair Jackson. Yes.
I mean, we have a volunteer here, so the chair of that committee could certainly be identified in real time. Yes, he did. Commissioner Terry.
Just while we're waiting on clarity on that, I think my only comment in relation to outcomes is that I think the data we're requesting is sharing a lot about the process, who, what, when, and all of that. I think what's really important to know is for those who complete it, why did they complete it? Why was it successful? Who are those families? What made it successful? I think it's not just about did they complete the program, it's about what supports did they have in the community, who was in their family, who was encouraging them. So I think that's a part of the story. Someone completed it, but there's a reason why. Someone didn't complete it, and there's also a reason why. So I think that's important data to capture as well, to know what's working and how we pour into that.
Thank you for that. You can confirm, Mr. Girdon, that you guys are not tracking in that way though, currently, right?
We're open to looking at data, and we're not tracking outcomes the way you just described it.
Would you guys be open
on
to?
the adult side, but we're open to further discussion.
Yeah. Would you guys be open to tracking that going forward?
We're open to further discussion on it.
So the bylaws provide that the chair will choose the members unless the commission votes by 2/3 majority to choose a different process, in which case y'all would have to state the process and vote to accept the process.
And was that chair of the commission or chair of the committee?
Chair of the commission.
Okay, so that committee, the members of that committee is going to be identified at a later time. By me, this afternoon. Okay, panelists, thank you all for indulging. We are going to move on to the next agenda item, excusing you. We are going, yes, so let's take a break. Sometimes we just power through these things. They're 4 hours long now. Let's take a 15-minute break.
For those of you who are listening on the WebEx, we'll return at 11:20.
where we will discuss and take appropriate action on a report from the Los Angeles County Office of Inspector General on the movement of youth from Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall and Juvenile Hall to Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. If you'd like to please your hand now on WebEx. If you're in the room, you can approach the front of the room to get in line when the presentation ends. Here to present first on this item is Eric Bates from the Office of the Inspector General, who will share with us an overview of the findings from Felicia Cotton, Eric Strong, and Albert Banuelos.
Good morning, Commissioners. My presentation actually is going to be brief, which is a good thing compared to the transfer of youths from last year from Central to Barry J. My staff, along with the Department of Justice, was present at the transfer from both Central and Barry J. From Central, we were there both days. And the overall transfer of the youths went pretty smoothly. There was one incident that you'll see in the report where a youth kicked the door open of the van while they were traveling to Los Padrinos from Central. There was not a major incident from that. The van returned to Central. They got into another van and then proceeded with the trip. And nothing else really significant. There were no uses of force that were reported to my office or the ombudsman relating to the transfer. The transfer of the youths from Barry J, excuse me, we had an issue with that because we were not notified of the first day of transfers, even after extensive discussion with the department of our presence being there. The chief apologized for that and said he would look in to see where the failure was. But we were not present during the first day of transfer. The second day went smoothly again as the transfers from Central. And I did notice, I'd like to commend the probation department because I did notice a significant number of staff at each facility that were assisting in boarding and the escorting and assigning the rooms to the youths at Los Padrinos. And I think it was important for them to be there because I think it provided a wealth of experience by the staff. There are staff, senior staff there, pulled from all over the county, as I'm told, to be present during the transfer. And I think that was important because I think it helped look and see if there were potential issues that were developing. It probably helped address issues that did come up, and you had a wealth of experience as opposed to just a small amount of staff there who may have normally been involved. And as I said, it was a drastic change from the transfer of youth from Central to Barry J a year ago. That was pretty bad. There were no reports during this transfer like there were there of improper searches. There was no destruction of property. So overall, it went very smoothly. Obviously, we know there was a weapon found there about a week or so after the transfer. We don't know if it was already there prior to the transfer or the weapon came in during the transfer, but we have recommended continually that staff be better screened in bringing in their own personal belongings to prevent situations such as this. And then also just the continuing communication between the probation department and the stakeholders we feel is very important so that there isn't a lack of notification as we had with the the first day of transfers from Barry J. Other than that, that is all I have from that report, and I'm open to any questions.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Seem to be the one. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Can the other two presenters introduce themselves?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me? Excellent, thank you. My name is Albert Banuelos. I am the newly appointed superintendent of Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall.
Thank you for being here.
Good morning. My name is Eric Strong, and I am the Chief Safety and Security Officer. I've been with probation probably about a month now. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to making progress along this road.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with a few questions related to your report, Mr. Bates. Just starting with the issue of notification, and that there was a failure to provide the OIG with notification that young people were being moved, I think, that first group. Just wondering if we discovered what the issue was so that we can make sure it doesn't happen again.
No, I have not been told what the issue was or where the failure occurred. But I'm looking forward to hearing what the chief finds out. But no, I don't know where it happened.
And going forward, is that who's responsible? I guess I know it's like the probation department as a whole, but is there one person or like, is there an individual from whom that information comes from? Like, would it be Mr. Banuelos? Would it be, I don't know. Who would it come from if you know?
I don't know if there's a normal process as to where it would come from in our discussions, and hopefully there's not going to be many more transfers of the youth. But we were informed by county council of the moves. We were informed that morning of when exactly that day was going to happen. And then on this first day of the Barry J move, county council wasn't even informed. So it was not the person that was previously informing me to blame. They weren't informed. So it was somewhere in the probation department, someone dropped the ball, and I'll just wait for the chief to provide an explanation for it.
Okay. Adding to the list of questions. Then related to the discovery of the firearm at Los Padrinos, you noted in here that, right, there's some concern about the lack of screening of staff and staff belongings and how that continues to be a concern. I remember at our last POC meeting, I believe it was Mr. Wood who assured us that there was all sorts of screening and of staff and that, essentially there was, that my question, I don't know, maybe weren't being asked, but if you could explain a little bit more about your concern about the lack of screening of staff and staff belongings, and if that continues to be an issue or if that was more connected to like a historical issue.
That was more connected to a historical issue at the time that report was written. And we have Mr. Strong here who can better address the specific things that are happening now. I can say that since that issue, I've been there a number of times and the screening is incredibly more intense than previous, especially compared to Central and Barry J. So I'm hopeful that we're on the right track towards everyone being screened. But again, I think Mr. Strong can probably add more to that than I can.
Okay, and I'm going to turn to Mr. Strong in just a second, but you said in comparison to Central and Barry J. Again, is that like a historical comparison or is that what you're seeing presently, that there are still kind of gaps or concerns related to staff being
At
screened?
Barry J, there are still some gaps. At Central, not so much. I haven't seen anything there lately because the youth aren't there. And the manner in which I was checking is not the same. But we did see a situation not too long ago at Barry J that is a little troubling that Mr. Strong is aware of and is addressing. But I would say we're heading in a better direction than before.
Are you able to speak to what that issue was?
Not at this point. It's
Okay.
under investigation, so I
All right.
don't want to hammer that.
I guess, and Mr. Strong, if you wanted to share kind of how this concern is being addressed.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we are looking at to enhance security, to prevent contraband from coming in, both from external sources as well as internal sources. To understand what it looks like to walk into, let's say Los Padrinos or Barry J, you go through a metal screening process with a baggage scanner. We have implemented a clear bag policy for all people coming in, including our employees. There's a no cell phone policy that has been enacted or actually reminded. One thing to remember is that we contract with outside security to staff basically the weapon screening or the entrance. In my experience in having conversations with them, some of the issue was maybe a lack of training on their part. lack of understanding about what we expected from them, lack of understanding in terms of what their authority was to stop people from coming in. So we've done a few things. Number one is we've increased the technology. We've improved the technology slightly, but we're looking to improve it even more with our baggage scanner, our metal detectors, our body scanners. Have had numerous conversations with the personnel that work there to give them a list of expectations and trainings and things to look for. The other thing is we've increased staffing there. We have doubled our staffing. We've increased our perimeter checks. I think the most important thing is that we are also working with our employees on a daily basis so that they understand the expectations when they come into these facilities. And we're just really bringing it up to industry standards and best practices. I mean, you can't walk into a concert or a game, these days without going through some type of screening. So it stands to reason that you're walking into a secure detention facility. There needs to be some very robust screening in doing so. So I've talked to many of the employees. They are noticing, enhanced screening. They are appreciating the fact that there is enhanced screening. We've posted a supervisor and or one of our special enforcement operations personnel there, which gives a little bit more authority in order to deal with any employees or any other people that are coming in that are maybe being indignant or belligerent towards security. These are all things that are increasing increasing security and decreasing the amount of contraband that's coming in. As far as the weapon being found, I'd like to thank, Downey Police Department for their quick response. They responded and handled the matter in a very professional way. I mean, it obviously is a crime. So that investigation is being handled. It's an ongoing investigation, so we don't have any other information that we can share at that time. But again, we are handling these things and we're taking them very seriously.
And is your work connected to all of the facilities or really just LP?
I feel like it's just LP, but it is connected to all of them. Yes, I was at Barry J. Nydorf just a couple of days ago and pretty much reviewing particularly their entrance, and again, having those conversations with the security personnel, making sure that there's supervision there, making sure that they understand the absolute expectations. And I noticed some it was pretty robust screening even for me to get in. And there were also our SEO personnel that are staffing these doors as well. So it will be for all facilities. We're moving in that direction.
And for the supervisor SEO who's kind of like staffing or supporting the outside contractor, are they there all day or what are their hours? Is it just like during shift change?
So there is a supervisor there specifically for shift change. That is the high traffic time. SEO is there pretty much throughout the day for the first two shifts, and they remain during the shift change from second and third shift. And let me add too that there's additional staffing there on the weekends when there's visiting.
And then my last question was related to the assessment of the transfer section, where probation reported that the transfer of youths did not negatively impact education and programming as the transfers occurred essentially after class had ended. So I'm assuming that it wasn't impacted, for example, if they were coming from Central or Barry J on that side. But I don't know, maybe that's for you, Mr. Banuelos. I think last month I had asked if Mr. Wood could provide, I don't think programming was up and running yet. It was just rec. And so I'm going to reiterate my ask, if you could provide the programming schedule, and also if you could share when that started up again. And,
Sure.
and by programming, I mean beyond rec, like outside providers coming in.
Absolutely. In regards to programming, we could definitely provide you guys the newest calendars. That's not a problem. Recreation has been consistent. What we are not at the point where we need to be is with our programming in the units with the youth. We do have an element of programming, but nowhere we want to go. Currently, we have 9 buildings open, which equates to about 18 units. We probably have on our calendar 6 or 7 different programs coming in. That's not enough programming. There's no one in probation from the line staff to administration to say we don't want programming. So we got to work diligently with our partners to get more people in there to work with these young people. In regards to, was that disturbed during the transition? I would say there was a fall off because at Central, it was pretty robust at some point. I don't think all of our partners have come over to LP just yet. Getting emails just this morning that more conversation is happening to bring some of those programs back and get them on calendar.
I guess, what's the issue? Is it just like, yeah, I guess I'm confused as to what the issue is.
Let me try to clarify. I don't want anybody confused because it's an important topic. Programming has been traditionally difficult to obtain just because of the layers in the county to get people in. We had conversations yesterday with some of the district members saying, what do we need to get people in here? So we need a better system to get our community partners in here, to get them in quickly, get them funded. And so that mechanism seems to be lengthy. Again, it's not that we don't want it. And in addition to that is the coordination of that. So that's not usually the difficult part, because if we have people at our doors wanting to come in and work with the young people, we'll get the calendar set up, we'll get them in to work with the kids. But I do think there was a fall off from Central to LP, and we have our eye on it. I'm working daily with our program coordinators to reach out to people, reaching out to administrators offsite to say if there's anybody in contact with our partners at ARC, HDA, who can they bring in? So it's something at the top of the agenda, because as we all know, more programming, a better and healthier culture we could kind of develop there at LP.
Yeah, no, I guess the confusion is because the folks who are coming into Central are probably already, in a position where they've got a contract set up, everything's kind of good to go. So I guess I just don't understand why that didn't immediately transfer to LP.
I wouldn't be able to speak to why those programs are not coming. I don't know if that was a decision or they're just there to see how things are working out, or I wouldn't be able to speak for all of those organizations.
Okay, but it's more an organizational thing, not a probation thing.
Probation is wide open. We want programs. Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, yes.
If I could just clarify, we did receive the July program calendar from Los Padrinos, and we're waiting for the August calendar still, but that is among the things that we received recently that we're really happy to have. So I'm happy to share that with commissioners.
I mean, July 23rd, I think that was our last meeting, right? Did I make that up?
We received it since our last meeting.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Canales.
Thank you, Commissioner Kakani. Yes, this question is either for Mr. Strong or Bornelos. I'm just wanting to ask about the July 28th incident and the discrepancies, as it was referred to as a major disturbance by probation, but then the media outlets were saying that it was a riot. And so what would you have described it as?
Well, we really don't have any control how the media reports it out. The terminologies they use. Internally, we would call it a disturbance, a major disturbance. It was something I don't think we've experienced. Mr. Strong was there that evening, myself, all of our administrators are there. So internally, when we produce, whether it's reports or notifications, we're identifying it as a major disturbance.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I know there was also some information about assaults on staff, but then there was also information released that there were no injuries as well. So that was a little bit like
Let me clarify that. So there were staff that were definitely assaulted. The term that we used were there was no major injuries, meaning there was blood drawn or people having to take out 911 in ambulances. They were able to walk out on their own 2 feet. That doesn't discredit the assaults that did happen towards staff that evening. I spoke to them as they walked out of that building, and you could imagine our young people in our care have their layers of trauma. But the layers of trauma that came out of that unit from our officers, I witnessed it firsthand, and being attacked by several people at one time will put anybody into a state of mind that's not healthy. And so whether there was no blood drawn, whether there was no major bones broken where we had to pull people on an ambulance, I'm glad we didn't get to that point. I'm grateful we didn't get to that point, but there was still damage to everybody involved. It's a traumatic experience.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm not sure if anybody has seen the attached motion in the agenda, but I would like to bring forth a motion that I think that would be beneficial to not just the probation oversight and the youth and the community, but to probation as well, to get clarification on this. And so I would like to bring forth a motion requesting that the Office of the Inspector General investigate and report back on the incident at Los Padrinos on July 28th, 2023. Now, do I ask for a second? Or do I read the whole motion, or?
I would suggest for ease of order that we do discussion first, but it is ultimately up to you all.
Oh.
We do need a second.
Discussion first.
And is that discussion related to the motion or discussion related to everything LP connected?
Related. And we also need to take public comment before we take a vote.
Okay. All right, so before we move to a second, is there any discussion related to?
I would like to hear from Mr. Bates on his feelings about the motion.
I would like to say, I share Commissioner Canales' concern as to what happened. But I, at this time, like the probation department, we are operating, my office is operating at 50% of the staff that has previously been approved. And we are obligated to provide reports to the California Department of Justice as well as the Board of Supervisors. So as much as I would like to take on the task of providing a report relating to that issue, as you see, we take our reports very seriously. We make sure they're fact-based, researched, and comprehensive. And to do that for an independent request like this is more than what my staff at this point can handle. I will say, though, that as always, we are here to address any concerns that any commissioner has. My staff and myself are consistently in the facilities. So if there is a concern that comes to your attention, please let me know and we will respond to it. But as far as providing an actual formal report on that incident at this time, due to our staffing concerns, I don't think that'd be possible.
Thank you for that. Can I ask, you mentioned that you're working at 50% capacity. Is that because you have half that staff or because of call outs?
No call outs. Fortunately, it's not due to call outs. We've been approved for the positions, but my understanding they have not been provided, and that is above my pay grade as to the reasons. I just know that we do not have all the staff that we are supposed to have.
Can I make a friendly amendment in my own motion? Okay. I would like to make a friendly amendment that along with this motion, that the Board of Supervisors also approve the budget to fulfill the remaining 50% so that you can be at 100% capacity in your position to carry on the inspections, because you have to turn over these reports to the DOJ and to the Board of Supervisors. So I would like to add in there that the Board of Supervisors immediately provide the budget and the remaining 50% staff, if I can. Does that sound friendly enough? Okay. Well, I don't even know if anyone's going to second it, but I'm on a roll here. So, and that's my motion. But then now we go to the.
Is there any additional discussion, questions?
I guess I'm curious. Is the OIG going to have to do reports on every single incident that occurs? And is it going to be different levels that we're going to request? Or I just assume somebody's doing some type of investigation on the incident already. Perhaps the department. And if they're doing it and share that, what they can, wouldn't it be more appropriate to ask the OIG to come in after they review the initial report by probation, if they do? Because institutions are difficult to run, and even the best run institution is going to have incidents. And I'm just kind of curious as to, is this going to be a pattern that every time there's an incident, we're going to need the OIG to involve themselves?
I think I can address that from an operational standpoint. So this would be only the second time that the Probation Oversight Commission in 2.5 years has requested a specific investigation from the OIG. The first time was in regards to OC spray, where I wish I could remember the exact wording, but it was incidents in which the cause of the OC spray previous to the spray was something other than violence. And requesting that the OIG review the video of those cases. And then from the perspective of how the ordinance is written, that is exactly the way this was planned. So the Probation Oversight Commission has significant limitations on receiving confidential information. The Probation Oversight Commission is not allowed to meet in closed session, and therefore you cannot discuss as a group confidential information. There is no format for that, and not allowed to request or receive confidential information from the department. And it's listed in the ordinance that the plan is for the Probation Oversight Commission to, maybe Stephen could pull up the wording. I don't think it says instruct, but it's along those lines of request that OIG do the investigation for the Probation Oversight Commission and then report back, because Eric and his team can review confidential information. So that was always the plan, was that the OIG would be the investigative body. And I think what you're hearing is that that doesn't work when the OIG doesn't have the staff capacity to be able to do that. Is that a fair characterization, Mr. Bates?
Yes, that's my understanding as well.
Yes, thank you for your question, Commissioner Mundo, because in a perfect world, that would be good, right? To have everything with oversight. But I think here with the extenuating circumstances of a youth now being charged as an adult for the escape, was there mental health issues? Was there underlying issues? I think that, it should have a little bit more extensive oversight. And also now we have the re-implementation of the OC pepper spray, which we had worked so hard on, just trying to get that to a space. So I think because of these extenuating circumstances, I do believe that this is just.
Oh, I agree 100%. I'm just wondering the extent of it, but would the OIG go into the specific details of a youth, or all, there were 6 or 7 youth and their independent cases and their emotional state?
If, as a formal report, I doubt we would go into that detail unless it was relevant to some extent. It's not been, we've not used those parameters in previous reports. So, but I don't want to say that we would not look at that. If it was clearly a factor somehow in the situation, I think we would address that. But historically, since I've been here, we've not done that. And again, though, we're back to not being in a position at this point to even take that on. But as Commissioner Mundo said, I believe the department is doing an investigation, and that hopefully will provide some insight as to what happened and ways to prevent it from happening again. And of course, we will look at that report. And if I don't want to go off too far on a limb, but if there is something striking in that report, there may be something that we want to respond to. But again, I don't know what the probation department's report will ultimately say, but I do believe, and I don't want to speak for them, but I believe there is an investigation going on relating to it.
I guess sorry, I just have one thing I wanted to lift up. I cannot remember if it was Mr. Strong or Mr. Banuelos who said that nothing of this nature has happened before. So I think that, warrants even like contemplating this motion, given that this is kind of a unique situation based on how it was relayed by Mr. Strong or Mr. Banuelos. And also, I don't know if it's confirmed that probation is doing some sort of internal investigation, if there's a timeline for that. and if that report will be publicly shared or at least shared with the Probation Oversight Commission. So maybe those questions could be answered.
So let me address a couple of things. First of all, coming from a background dealing with custodial environments or detention facilities, a riot is typically defined as a large majority of the incarcerated population that's involved, or a significant majority of the people that are there that are causing such a disturbance. As was stated, this was maybe 6 to 8 people, which would not be considered a riot. A major disturbance, because did it cause a lockdown and did it cause a disruption in the daily activities that are going on? Absolutely. In this case, to be fully transparent, probation does not have a built-in intelligence unit that would go back and investigate and find out what the causes are. We will be doing an after-action report. An investigation has been done into some of the crimes, some of the violations, and we are looking into some of the causes of this, which I think we know, as was stated, is significantly related to short staffing. So as far as a full-on intelligence gathering investigation, that is something that, to be quite honest, probation is not equipped to do at this time, but it is something that we want to bring in. And that is how you're going to find out when you do these investigations, hey, what precluded this? What was in the mindset of those that moved forward with the actions that moved forward that kind of caused this? So I hope that answers your question to some extent. Again, investigation into the incident is, I'm sure what you're looking for is a little bit different than investigation into the actions that took place. And if is that for clarification, if actually what you're looking for?
I think that's a question for Commissioner Canales.
Yes. Yeah,
Well,
I'm
and
every part of it.
yeah, and so just to let you know, one of the things that I'm looking to bring in when we do have these major incidents is that the very minimal is what we call an after-action report, which kind of goes over some of the things and we get some learned lessons, some conclusions, some recommendations, some corrective actions that we can foresee so this kind of stuff happening in the future and how we can derail it or keep it from impacting our population.
But they don't have capacity to it.
Commissioner,
That's
I
the
also,
OIG. I think I was asking if probation, what the status was of them generating a report and sharing it with the POC or the public.
I'd like to add something to what Mr. Strong was saying. So internally, we have a critical incident report process. So anytime administration finds an incident that of this magnitude or contraband that raises concern, there is an internal investigation. Then it's reported out to our executives. And that process is not only to identify where the problem was, but then learn from it as administration of what can we put in place to make sure it doesn't happen. So that's just part of a routine that will get done. Mr. Strong has brought up some great points of how extensively we should and maybe be going towards, but currently we will be doing the critical incident report later then.
Wendy, I saw you wanted to share something. And then
Well, I actually, now I have 2 questions. Mr. Bates, am I correct that you are invited to those critical incident report meetings, or were, or are, or sometimes are?
We're invited to the meetings if there is, where it's determined whether or not an investigation will be conducted. We do see the critical incident reports. So in theory, if we did see one, such as on this event, and there were some glaring deficiencies, that would raise our antennas. So we are aware of them and are privy to those reports. But the meetings that we're a part of more specifically deal with whether or not incidents lead to investigations.
Thank you. And then
Administrative and criminal investigations.
I just wanted to read what it says in the ordinance. Thank you, Ismail, for sending this. It says regarding right after the fact that we, the Probation Oversight Commission, cannot receive confidential data. It says the commission must use the staff of the OIG to undertake investigations and other commission activities that require access to confidential records. The commission shall direct, supervise, and evaluate all work performed by the Inspector General that is initiated by the commission. It's pretty straightforward.
Thank you for that clarification. And I would like to move forward with my motion and with the friendly amendment. Are we still open for discussion?
Who's in charge? You. We haven't had all our positions funded yet, have we? By the county?
That is correct. We have 7 out of 19.
So I'm a little hesitant to ask the board to pay for staff for them when they haven't yet paid for staff for us.
Any other discussion? Okay. Oh,
And I would like to clarify something. I don't actually, now that I'm thinking, I don't know if it's a lack of board action as opposed to somewhere else in the process. So I don't want to put it on the board as possibly not. I believe the board has done what they're supposed to do. But again, I'm speaking out of place here. So.
okay. So there is a motion by Commissioner Canales requesting an investigation and report back by the Office of the Inspector General. There's some other specific directives. Do those need to be read out?
I don't believe so because those have been attached to the agenda and available to the public and all the commissioners.
Okay. And at this point, I'm asking for
A second?
okay, first a second and then public comment?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a commissioner who is willing, interested in seconding this motion? I'll second it.
Okay. So if you'd like to make public comment on the issue of this motion or on the issue of the move to Los Padrinos, which is the agenda item as listed, please step forward in the room or use the raise your hand feature. And on the WebEx, or if you're on the phone, dial *3 to raise your hand. And we'll start with Eduardo.
Yes, hello, Eduardo Dumbrique. The Office of the Inspector General, I believe, has some responsibility in the legal settlement that was made in 2021. And one of the findings there that the county juvenile halls are required to be safe and supportive, home-like environments that are not treated as penal institutions. So to the extent that the Office of the Inspector General, the Probation Department, and Safety and Security have to work together, I hope that you guys keep them principles in mind, that it's important to keep juvenile halls and not penal institutions. I recognize the need to understand when incidents happen, why they're happening, by who they're happening, how can you prevent them in the future. But I don't think that you want to investigate and start to label these children in a way that they do in the prison setting, where it becomes the whole thing. And that's why, you know, people were in solitary confinement for 35 years. I spent 13 there myself for innocuous communication, associating. And I'm afraid that the path that you suggested would go down that line and start to become a real control over the kids, labeling them. Inspector General helped me greatly one time when I needed it. The children need to be playing baseball, playing soccer, painting, going to therapy, having counseling, having meetings with their families. And if we provide these types of activities for these children, I think that we'll see a reduction in violence. They'll have meaningful and purpose to want to go home. They'll want to educate themselves. But right now, I don't know that that's all being done. I think that we're just housing them, and it's crazy, but they might have more program in prison than they do in the juvenile hall. And for children that are struggling, that it manifests themselves saying, fuck it, I'm gonna break out of here. You know, something to that extent is not necessarily something you're gonna blame the child on, but look at the conditions that were created that's that circumstance where someone felt that they had to try to break out.
Thank you.
Hello, Robert Kirshner again. I'd like to commend Mr. Strong and Mr. Banuelos on their statements regarding the issues of riot versus disturbance and large disturbance. In my career, we didn't use the word riot. It was a no-no. So, and the fact that you are setting up some procedures that have lacked for many, many years. And my experiences of dealing with Los Padrinos back, well, prior to me retiring, so that was back in the 90s. I was really concerned about the statement that Commissioner can I say it again? Canali stated regarding the mental health of the 18-year-old that escaped. Once he escaped and he's over 18, he is an adult. He committed an adult crime, and the crime's going to be filed against him. His defense attorney can use any mental health issues as a defense for him. But these kids, children, they all deserve a chance. They all deserve to have the best recreation, the best education in a safe and secure environment. And when I say secure environment, I don't mean a prison environment. I mean an environment with lots of supervision and interaction with the staff and staff that really care about them. And I know that, I hope that probation will be tightening up their screening and selection process and hiring. And my last question is, since they're all peace officers under 830.5, do you have a place for the probation officers and staff to lock up their personal weapons before they go through screening at the facility? Is that a yes or no, maybe? Am I allowed to ask a question?
I wasn't sure if I was allowed to answer.
It's up to you.
Well, my time's up.
Yep, your time's up, but we can ask them to answer after. You can ask them to answer now. You're the boss.
Perhaps we can answer after when
Okay.
there's final discussion before the vote.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thomas?
Again, I just had a few questions about the searches part. I responded to the incident. I drove about an hour, 15 minutes to get there because we got the call for everybody to show up. And I noticed the security was pretty tight. Everybody turn in your cell phones, go back to your car if you have it, for some. But as I sat there in a little area and watched directors and some supervisors come in, they're on their phones. Okay, so what allows them to enter with their phones and their stuff, and the officers are in there on lockdown 24 hours, family watching on the news of all this craziness going on. They don't know what's really happened. They don't know the difference between a riot and a major disturbance. They just know their family is in there and they want to know what's going on, but they can't get in contact with them. But the directors can. The directors can get hold of their family. So I just want to see the fairness of it. If we're going to take cell phones, you take it from everybody. Nobody should be able to walk in with it, and not just certain people. And as far as the kids, I actually worked with 3 of them. And we could say mental health, but those guys are really smart. Really smart. They're sophisticated. One of the guys that was involved actually did the same thing at our camp. We was able to stop it, but he did the same thing at our camp. So we may not be able to call it a riot or major disturbance, but it was an organized attack. That's what I would call it. Because I talked to the officers that work there. I know these kids. I knew them personally. I worked with them face to face, one-on-one myself. Organized it. It was a plan for an escape. And that's what it was, an organized attack. So we really need to look at how we're going to do this safety thing and thank God the chief brought back pepper spray. I know you guys hate that, but thank God they brought that back. And we need to work on a way to somehow keep it, or at least have it in an area. So if approximately 13, not 6 or 8, but approximately 13 kids do that again, we can stop it before it gets out of hand.
Thank you, Thomas.
president of Central Juvenile Hall in Silmar back in 95 to 96. Oh, sorry. And what I learned when my stay there was we had a balance. Staff had their job to do. We were there for a crime. What I'm taking is we're taking away from staff. And you're giving power to the, when I was there, it was wards. And we give too much power to a ward or too much power to the staff, it's gonna take the balance off of it. I believe we should have some type of balance in this. And I was involved in riots. I was involved in, when I was in CYA, I was involved in riots. I was stabbed in the side. And staff had controls. But what we had with staff was a communication line. It got to a point where I wanted a program when I wanted to do my program. And then you had the new guys coming in that wanted to destroy that program. But we will communicate with the staff. And like, hey, we excuse my language, we gotta fuck up in the group. You know, and from what I'm taking now is we're taking that communication line from them to us. And you're allowing the wars to run the program. And at the end of that, it's gonna be nothing. I did close to 10 years and thank God I never went back again. But I had a good communication line because that man right there, he used to be my ex-pro officer in there. And when I came out of that jungle and came to the bigger jungle, he's the one that helped me. I didn't have programs like this to help me because of my commitment offense that I went to prison or to CYA for. And from what I'm taking from this is we're taking away from these people. And when you take away from them, you're taking away from us. Because now we can't reach out for help if we need help.
Thank you. I really appreciate you coming today and sharing. It doesn't look like we have any other comments in the room, so we'll go to the virtual comments. Ismail, I'm just going to turn the mic over to you if that's, do you mind doing that? Oh, okay, we can do it that way. Looks like we're going to start with Aditi Sharekar.
Good afternoon, Aditi Sharekar, Children's Defense Fund, California. Want to highlight a probation firearm was found inside LP after staff were not searched coming in. And I want everyone in that room to imagine if a young person who is out on probation was caught with a firearm, what would happen? The system's response would be the most punitive measures possible. But when it's probation, we can't even get a report from the OIG. The response is tepid at best. And we know if it was a young person, the entire weight of the system would come down on them. But this is a department that gets pass after pass after pass. So I'm not surprised, but I'm also enraged because how many chances are we going to give them when the youth in their wards in their ward get nothing? And we heard just now that the idea of an organized attack, I think the organized attack is actually orchestrated by every adult who's responsible for the safety of young people in LA County, because the adults that are responsible have been passing the buck or actively resisting reform or weaponizing bureaucracy to make sure that reform doesn't happen. And if we're going to be talking about who is under attack here, it's pretty clear that it's the young people. It's the young people that are suffering inside halls that have had no meaningful change from when they were found unsuitable to where they are now. And if we can't even get an investigation, if we can't even get a report, then I don't know how any of us can sit here and think that we're making progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi. Next up, we have a call-in user. You need to dial *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. Your call-in user number 22, and your number starts with 21.
Oh, my name is
Okay,
Tori
we can hear
Kanice
you.
Dufont.
You can begin.
My name is Tori Kanice Dufont, and I am a concerned grandparent of a young man that was transferred to Los Padrinos. I have several concerns. The first one is a lack of communication and response from the leadership there. I made a phone call, never heard back. emailed Albert Buenelos and haven't heard back from him yet. There's disorganized and chaotic visiting with long, unacceptable wait times up to 3 hours. This discourages families from visiting, and for the mental and emotional health of the youth, they need to see their families, to show up, support them, and love them. A structured system and schedule must be used and published in advance. There are health and safety issues surrounding no access to water for visitors and youth during visiting hours, especially on hot days. There was a canopy provided, but no water nearby the visiting area for either youth or visitors. This is a health disaster waiting to happen, and there's a potential for heat exhaustion and, worse yet, heat stroke. There's a lack of activities, recreation, and exercise. The children need fresh air, mental activities, and recreation. This cannot be overemphasized as it impacts their holistic health. Boredom increases the chances of fights and disturbances or riots. There's inconsistent provision of daily education. The children are being given packets with no actual instruction. And then last but not least, there's a serious issue related to the access to legal representation. Lawyers are having to wait up to 3 to 4 hours to see their clients. No access leads to delayed due process. This is a violation of the 6th and 14th Amendment rights. Additional meeting rooms or other alternatives must be implemented immediately. Thank you.
Thank you for calling. Also, a good reminder that those of you who submitted written comment on this item, the comments have been shared with the commissioners and are available attached to the agenda. And next up, we are going to Maureen Pacheco. Maureen, if you can unmute yourself. Let's go. Can you find her on the list? Maureen, if you can unmute yourself to comment. We can go to the next speaker and then come back to Maureen. If you could raise your hand again if you want to speak. We'll go to Tori. Tori, can you unmute yourself and we'll get your time going? No? Okay. Any other hands up? Okay, can we hear you now?
This is Tori, and I spoke already.
Okay, great. Thank you. No more comments. Okay.
Okay, so at this point, do we need to vote on the motion or is there more discussion?
I do either.
We should what?
You can take more discussion if you wish.
Okay.
Okay, so I may ask you to read the passage from our charter, because from what I understood, it was that we can have investigations, and when we hit that confidentiality rule, we can ask the OIG to go take care of that and come back to us. So it would actually not be an OIG investigation. It would be a POC investigation using OIG staff when necessary, which is not, I think, what the motion says, but is something that I would be much more supportive of. So can we get back
yes.
to what the rules are there?
Absolutely. So it says use of the Office of Inspector General staff for investigative purposes. The commission must use the staff of the OIG to undertake investigations and other commission activities that require access to confidential records. The commission shall direct, supervise, and evaluate all work performed by the Inspector General that is initiated by the commission. So I think I would agree with your assessment there, that we can do an investigation of non-confidential information. When we run up against the barrier to receiving information that is confidential is when we're instructed to use the OIG. Do you agree with that? Okay.
County Council, can I propose an amendment at this point, now that's been seconded?
I think that you're supposed to have to agree. Yes, Millie
I think I
seconded it.
seconded it.
So I believe what you would have to do is offer an amendment, and if it is accepted as friendly by the author and seconder, then you're good to go. If it's not, then I think we have to move forward to the vote and go from there.
Agreed.
Then I would like to propose, with the permission of the movant and second, that we redirect this motion to POC staff with the understanding that they will ask OAG to step in when necessary, and that the motion not include anything involving OIG's hiring processes or staffing or budgeting.
So is that a friendly amendment?
It's up to you whether it's friendly or not. I'm your friend, but it's for you to decide whether or not it's friendly or not.
I think both Commissioner Canales and I accept the friendly amendment. And so now perhaps Wendy, you can support us with a vote.
So the motion is actually attached to the agenda. It is a request for investigation of the incident of July 28th, which has now been changed for the POC staff to lead that investigation. So all the details are included in what's listed there. It's basically an investigation into what happened and what the results were and the characterization of the events that occurred, but it's pretty detailed document. Is that sufficient for you?
It's fair, but is it directed to staff or the full support of staff?
I think it's being directed to staff. Okay, Commissioner Canales,
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia Leyes,
Aye.
Commissioner Kakani,
Aye.
Commissioner Mundo,
Aye.
Commissioner Terry, and Chair Jackson. Okay, that motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so just go ahead, Mr. Bates.
Yes, I want to just let the commission know that we will support any efforts needed down the road when it gets to that point. But again, I have to reiterate that we are not able to take on any investigative roles ourselves or to provide any reports relating to that incident. But we will help in any way necessary, as we're obligated to do if there is a point where it's needed.
I understand the change in the motion to be that I'm responsible for conducting the investigation. And when I run up against something that is confidential, I need to call Eric. That's what everybody understands? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Did you have something you wanted to share, Commissioner Terry, or ask?
So we're done with the motion? I just had some follow-up questions.
I think we're done with that motion. And so if there are any follow-up questions related to LP generally, this would be the time.
I think it was, you were going to answer a question I think someone had raised in the audience. I lost track of it now, so I wanted to make sure you had time to answer that. But also there were some reports around the visitation and some of the challenges folks were having. So I was wondering if you guys could speak to that. Had one more. Oh, and then what happened with the staff who was assaulted? What services or supports are offered to staff when that happens in this instance?
Okay, let me make sure I cover all three. In regards to the officers and their weapons, they're not allowed on the premises. So even our special enforcement officers who are typically armed in the field, they'll lock those in their vehicles and won't come in the facility. So we do have weapons lockers for any law enforcement coming in through intake, so they can secure their weapons there. In regards to visiting, I apologize to the person who said I haven't gotten back to her. It's not a lack of effort. It's probably got lost in the email. So if she could resend that, I'll make sure to address it. In regards to visiting specifically, we are looking at different ways to make it much more efficient for our parents coming to visit. I understand the heat that we're going through, so we've already ordered misters for the canopies. I've ordered for the last 2 visiting sessions for water coolers to be not only at the canopies, but also in the lobby for the parents and visitors. So we are not where we need to be, but we're making strides to get there in order to make that an efficient process for people coming through. We're even looking into maybe getting wristbands that are colored so we know what group goes to what unit, what canopy, and then just move people quickly through groups. So we are looking and working with my managers and the supervisors who help coordinate a lot of that during the day of visiting. So did that cover all three? Yes, so staff assaults we take seriously. Again, me talking to one of the gentlemen that night, we offer services that the counties offer, but I actually need to touch back with them personally because after our conversations that night, I was concerned with their well-being. But yes, there is a proper process that we go through. We also offer peer assistance, and some of them were actually there that night that showed up, who are our certified peer assistance employees to offer any kind of counseling on the spot if they needed so. So we're definitely following up on them. Thank you.
Commissioner Mundo?
So I actually was at Los Padrinos on Sunday before visiting and throughout visiting, and I'm happy to report that it went really smooth. There was one issue with one parent, but not a result of the process. I found that the deployment staff were really helpful. They were engaging the families and sitting with families while they were visiting. Some of them actually knew some of the kids. Again, the reserves were there. And so the process, it's not easy moving people in and out, but from what I saw, they were making the best effort to make it quick. I think most people are waiting about 45 minutes, especially at 2 o'clock when there was a chip change. So that was good. With regards to programming, I reviewed some data, Mr. Benuelos, and 52% of the population right now in the juvenile hall is 17 and over. And there is a group, over 100 youth that have been in pre-dispo over 3 months, and 53 that have been in pre-dispo over 1 year, and about 17 that have been in pre-dispo over 2 years. Given that data, when the administration is thinking about programming, are you looking at the population at that level? And if you are, would that include weekend programming? Because that was one of the main concerns that staff was sharing while I spoke to staff during my visit, is that on the weekends right now, it's pretty bare, and it's because there's no school. So the kids are pretty idle a lot, and there's only so much rec they can do.
Yes, I want to add just one more detail to the visiting. So thank you for acknowledging the process is getting a bit better, but I'll always take ownership now that I'm in the seat in regards to making it even better and more efficient. We have added, I believe 2 days ago, a large row of lockers for our parents and visitors. So now when they come, some people come by commuter bus, they have somewhere to store their cell phones since they're not allowed, their personal items. We're going to keep extending that to meet the need. So that's just one more element in regards to the safety programming. I understand the need for proper programming for a certain age group. That's responsivity, right? We talk about evidence-based, risk, needs, and responsivity. That goes to bringing in programs that have shown to work with this age group. And if we get them in the doors, which we're all hoping as we talk about, we can get more, that we then do our self-assessments in regards to the young man to say, is this working for me? Is this something of interest? I know we tend to bombard our young people with surveys, just like we bombard people asking for data. So it is important. We want to know their voice and what they live. And there's a term in the LA model they call voice and choice. The kids need to know this is not working for me. We had traditionally at times just put programs in to say we're putting programs in and never really reflected back on how those kids are responding to those programs. So as we move forward, we definitely want to engage them on the weekends because the weekends are vital. When I was working with one of our administrators who was reaching out for programs, one of my requirements was if a program decides to come in, they need to include either a Saturday or a Sunday in their schedule. And we have to stop allowing people to just say, I'm there Monday through Friday, I'm engaged with the kids, but they never show up on the weekends.
Commissioner Terry?
Just as a follow-up to that, I think it was the last meeting where, or it was shared that there was maybe some preliminary discussions with youth and families about what types of services they wanted. So I don't know if there's been any follow-up on that. And in addition to books, I know there were some books that the youth requested, but there were maybe some challenges with getting them. So are there any updates from that or lessons we can learn from what the youth wanted at that point?
So I wasn't involved in that particular conversation, but I can reach back to see who got that going and then follow up.
So I actually saw a PowerPoint presentation by your colleague, Catherine Bay, which if we could share that with the commissioners, I'd love to do that. That's a result of a pretty in-depth survey she did with youth
Yes.
about the programming they wanted. So we'll add that to the list to follow up on. I don't see why she wouldn't want to share that. It was really smart. So
No, and I think she's actually had that presentation in front of some other partners. So that'll be
great. So that we do have some information on that. I'd be happy to share it.
In regards to the books and magazines as well, we've had a now influx, I hope I'm getting the number right, between 50 and 60 magazines, 50 books. This week, they're going through and destapling the magazines, putting that back together. My staff have assured me Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they'll be distributing those magazines and books. We do have one unit, GH, where they have books in the unit themselves. One of the barriers was, I believe, the library wasn't set up yet with their check-in and check-out system, which traditionally at Central, my understanding, is that's how they got books and took them back to the unit. So I'm sure the library is working hard to get that in place as well. But we do have some on campus now, and we'll move to get them into the units.
Okay, I just had a couple of follow-up questions, especially in light of the public comment and my conversation with some public defenders. Again, a month ago, Mr. Wood said that there was plenty of space for attorneys to visit. There was the kind of no longer used courthouse and courtrooms. But based on the public comment and based on conversations I'm having, attorneys are having a hard time accessing their clients. So can you speak to that a little bit? What is the plan? I mean, this is just on August 8th, so not that long ago, that an attorney had to wait quite some time to see their client, almost 2 hours, and then wasn't able to do so. And that feels wildly problematic.
It is problematic. So when I got their first notification via email that this was a long wait, the next day I went in to kind of assess our spaces. There are plenty of spaces on the plan in regards to the building, but a large part of that is not a secured area. Right? So the part that's secured that we could bring youth in and out so they can have meetings with their attorneys is much smaller. So what I'm currently doing is working with my management team to say, who needs to be in this area and who we could relocate in order to open up more spaces for our attorneys or visitors, special visits and so forth. I just touched back yesterday to make sure that nobody was waiting in the lobby for an extensive amount of period of time. And I was assured that it was moving much quicker, but it doesn't eliminate the fact that we need to redesignate space in secure area for those type of visits.
Okay. So is there a timeline for that? Just so we can expect a report back or report back to the public?
I don't have a timeline, and the reason is I have to work with another partner agent or one of our partner agents, MSB, who controls the facility, work with them, see what they can designate. Also operationally, we have a chapel at LP. 20-some years ago when I was there, we used it for visiting. We're using it for different things today. So I have to look at all those operationally, and I don't want to commit to give you an answer next week when I won't have that answer. But I will make a commitment that when we have it arranged differently, and things are running smoothly, that I can come back and say, this is what we did and how we did it.
Okay. And then just OC spray, I know, when the chief issued his statement and acknowledged that they were reinstating the use of OC spray, that it would be reviewed in the near future. I don't know what that means, what the plan is to review the use of OC spray. If you all are reviewing its current use, weekly use, what is the assessment that's happening right now as it relates to OC spray and ultimately phasing it out as was ordered by the board in 2019 or 2020?
I don't have an assessment today for you with OC. We monitor OC deployment, as you guys probably know, through our PIN system. So we can go back and gather how many have been deployed since.
Actually, that information was provided. I'm telling
Great.
you, we have been getting so much information. That information was provided, I want to say yesterday, and it is attached to the agenda under my report. The item number 7, is that correct? So we have the reports from the
Fantastic.
OC spray from, it's from July 24th through August 6th and includes post it being reissued at Los Padrinos.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that when I looked yesterday.
It was like last night that
Okay.
it was uploaded. You're forgiven completely.
And then I guess, in terms of phase out, is there a plan? Are you all what is the plan, if there is one?
I haven't been in discussions with the chief in regards to the phase out plan. And so I wouldn't want to speak on that topic until we have those discussions and maybe he has a plan in mind. So I wouldn't be able to speak on that topic.
And then my last question is just related to staffing. Call-outs are still an issue?
The word an issue probably has always been an issue, right?
Okay.
Have we improved? On some days, yes. We've seen some improvement. But that's not an overall assessment to say, yes, we're improving. There's still a lot of work to get our people back to work. I think as we move forward with an approach of taking security even at the front door that Mr. Strong has been instrumental in doing, that hopefully will, amongst other layers, that's not the only reason, but to showing our staff that we're taking their safety as well as the young people's safety serious at this institution, because contraband, whether that's illicit drugs, whether that's weapons, whether that's cell phones, those all lead to, at points, a problem, right? That staff have to deal with, that youth have to deal with, youth amongst youth amongst staff. So that dynamic, by increasing the level of security, we're hoping to start messaging to our staff that we're taking your safety and the youth safety seriously. But there are other areas within the department, administrative levels, that are taken in order to address some of those staff that are not coming back to work.
But it's still resulting, I mean, is our staff call-out still resulting in young people not being, for example, taken to school or not being able to go out for rec? Or like, does
No.
that remain an issue?
No.
So all units are being able to go outside every day,
Our recreations
not just indoor rec, but outdoor rec?
have been consistent. If a unit has not gone out for rec, it's for another element. Even if I have 10 bodies in the unit, there still could be a tone of, there's something going on. The kids are fighting amongst each other. There's arguments. But on a consistent basis, the majority of the units are going out for recreation and going to school. Huge improvement in our school, just our school movements. We have very invested staff of all ranks volunteering to be there just to get the kids to school and help with recreation. That speaks to their level of commitment, and I have not all their names in front of me, but they should be commended for saying, I want to help with the problem, and I'm going to help them go to school, and I'm going to help with recreation. So that element on the campus currently is something that's been a huge element to help us with our school and our recreation periods.
I don't have any other further questions.
Thank you. Something that's bothering me that Probation Officer Bell said, when they accidentally have their phones and they get to the institution, they have to go back out to the parking lot and leave them in the car. So there's no lockers, because with this heat, you can't be leaving your phones in the car because they could get damaged. And so they're not even allowed to use their phones during break or during lunch. It's just absolutely no phone. And when he mentioned the lockdown and family members out here watching concerned, and they couldn't even on their break make a phone call, that seems like unconstitutional. I mean, I wouldn't want it for anybody. So that did kind of strike me, but I would imagine it's not just at Los Padrinos, but it just got my attention that this is widespread, that maybe upon the entrance, there be some lockers installed so that staff could leave, their phones to use on breaks or lunch or something, because right now they have to leave them in the car. I'm wondering. That's a question and a statement all in one. I know it's a lot. Sorry.
Right. So just to address that, this is something that if you go to any lock facility nationwide, this is an industry standard. I understand that it's new and it's being implemented in a new fashion, in a new way for probation, and it's a bit of a disturbance for the employees. But this is a policy that's been in place for a long time that quite honestly hasn't been adhered to. And now we're bringing in new ideas and new thoughts, and we're really trying to get up to what the current standard is. Again, I can speak from my own personal context, having worked for LA County Sheriff's Department for close to 30 years. Nobody brings their phone in. They don't even try to, because that's the standard. The clear bag policy was implemented over a decade ago in most of our custodial facilities, lock facilities, detention facilities, whatever we want to call them. The reality of it is it's a security problem. When there's a lockdown, they don't get a break. they don't get a lunch break to get to their phones to let their families know. So they're even if we're in a lockdown, and there was a locker, they wouldn't be able to get to them to go. But here's what staff and everybody should understand is that there are numbers that families can call. And we'll make sure that we do a better job of getting those phone numbers out to our main control, our movement control, our officer of the day. And there are also phones within the buildings that can be used. This is not something that is an abnormality. This is not something that's an anomaly in this profession. I think it's something that staff are not used to, and they have to get to an adjustment period. No, we're not trying to keep anybody from their family. There are ways and there are built-in protocols. And again, I can't reemphasize enough that this is an industry standard, and it's a best practice for safety and security. So unfortunately, with the heat, we can't control, the temperature out there. And I mean, if they put their phones under the seat or in a glove compartment or in a center console, I leave my phones there. And let me just also go back to the comment about other people are allowed to bring their phones in. Also, part of industry standard is that there are certain people that are allowed to bring their phones in for investigative purposes. It is not the masses. It is not the norm. In a facility like Los Padrinos that is open and wide open, it is necessary sometimes for directors or above to be able to call in to get notifications for expediency, for efficiency of communication when things are happening. So that's also part of, pretty much a standard protocol when you go elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize it was industry standard.
Oh, Commissioner Garcia-Liz.
So Mr. Bates's report was specifically about the move, meaning like those 48 hours. It does not look into the larger question of has moving the youth to Los Padrinos been a good thing? And so I think if you look at that very narrow, how did the move go? That overall went well, it seemed like. I saw some issues with youth getting their personal belongings. We've worked on that. I think it's been handled. But, we still have to look at the bigger issue, which is not part of that report, which I'm not hearing, well, I heard public comment about, but every one of us commissioners who I've talked to have been there in person, have been quietly flipping out over how awful it is. Now, I haven't been there in a week and a half, so I'm glad that visitation this last weekend went well because it didn't happen the weekend before, and the weekend before that, it did not go so well. But, I think this puts it in perspective. We were talking about riots and what's the right word, or major disturbance. So the word I hear the most walking around is getting packed out. And the getting packed out is when you get jumped by all the other youth in your unit. And that, correct me here if I'm wrong, this has happened dozens of times in the last month. Like dozens of people have been packed out. And your comments earlier about how traumatic it was for the staff who were assaulted by these students. I'm sure it was, and I believe it was. And I believe it's equally traumatic for these dozens of kids who've had this happen to them. So it seems to me the violence is much worse in Los Padrinos than it was immediately prior in either Central or Sylmar. I think staffing, yes, it continues to be an issue. We were told that the minimum per unit would be 5, that we would have 7 staff per unit. When I visit, I commonly see 3. I've seen 2. And I have seen amazing reserves and people being reassigned and asking to stay over, but they don't know the kids and they're going to be in there for one day and they're going to leave. And so we're really relying, and when I see 3, it is usually 2 new DSOs who've just gotten there and 1 experienced person in the control room not talking to the kids. So there's no way to prevent people from getting packed out when nobody who knows how to stop these things is there in the room. So I think it's less Title 15 compliant than the unsuitable facilities we've left behind. We have some time to improve these, but I just want to make sure the big picture is still, I see in 6 to 9 months the BSEC shutting down Los Padrinos unless there is something radically different done. And I don't see any plans to do anything radically different. I just see lots of plans to keep working harder until we get things a little bit better, and that's not going to be sufficient.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia Lays. Any other comments?
I just had a question. Another staff concern was walkie-talkies and them being broken. Where are we with just replacing them or getting enough walkie-talkies? Or I guess they're called radios.
Yes, radios, walkie-talkie, I understood. We are bringing a whole new batch of different radios. The ones we currently have reach outside the walls. And so we're bringing a new batch not only for all of our staff, for our county partners that are on the facility, for everybody to be equipped with a radio that's internal and easy to communicate. So we got the approval, just waiting on the delivery.
I know that public comment kind of covered everything. Do we need to do public comment again or? Okay. I'm going to pass it back to Chair Jackson.
Commissioner Kakani for helping me facilitate. I needed to step away. And this is actually the agenda item I was most looking forward to talking about because I was at a LP last night. And to say that I was disturbed by what I saw is an understatement. I'm really pissed off by what I experienced last night. And it drove me into a bit of a rage as I was driving home. And I realized that, I mean, I can talk about this on another platform. I definitely plan on doing something about this, but I can agree with Commissioner Garcia Lays. The facility is going to get shut down if you guys don't do something. And there's no sign that you guys have any plans in place to do something about what was going on last night. You were not there, Mr. Strong. I did meet with Mr. Benuelos briefly, but you should just know that I ended up leaving because I didn't have the ability to debrief what I had experienced last night. I will move on to the next couple of agenda items, which we're going to end up tabling for our next meeting, but for the sake of managing time, I will work through agenda item number 5, which was the report back from the department, from the OIG on the DOJ settlement. As you can see, Eric Bates did leave. And so if I could, we should motion to table. Can we do them together? Okay. And agenda item number 6 was to discuss and take any necessary action on OIG and the investigation on the El Monte murder. Oh, sorry, let me make sure that I'm actually explaining that properly. The OIG investigation into the probation department's role in supervising the person on probation who was accused of murdering 2 El Monte police officers last year. Very important detail, so sorry to rush that, but we're going to be tabling that as well. So commissioners, a motion please to push these matters to next meeting.
I'll make a motion to table items 5 and 6 on the agenda and agendize them for the next meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? I presume there's no discussion. Okay, I'll call the vote to table these items. And just to be clear, OIG will be ready to present on all 3 of those items, including the El Monte incident report, which will be published between now and the next meeting. So they informed me of that. Okay, so we're voting to table items 5 and 6. Commissioner Canales? Commissioner Garcia Lays?
Aye.
Commissioner Kokani?
Aye.
Commissioner Mundo?
Aye.
Commissioner Terry?
Aye.
And Chair Jackson. Okay, so that passes unanimously to table those 2 items.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I forgot to mention a couple seconds ago that we do intend on hosting a town hall, so some of us commissioners can speak more, maybe just speak to their experiences in some of the in the facilities in a way that is just much more focused on storytelling and really kind of bringing some of these issues down to ground level so we can understand that we're not just reporting back, we're really witnessing a kind of devastation that's not only impacting us, but just giving me a completely different understanding of what kind of issue is in front of us. And so I'm looking forward to talking about some of the things that I experienced last night. I'm also planning to revisit the facilities much more frequently to see how the issue is either getting worse or better. though I doubt the latter. Agenda item number 7, we are going to hear a report back from our staff on the commission's progress on our strategic plan and operational goals, and also this great POC, this model of change that our staff created, as well as our focus areas for the fiscal year, for the current fiscal year, which Wendy is going to take the lead on.
I'm so proud of what I'm about to present, and also of the staff and of the commissioners, and very not proud of my ability to predict how long things are going to take on the agenda. That is clearly not a skill I have learned over 2.5 years. There are 2 items that are attached to the agenda, which are things that the staff have worked on. But I first want to say that in 2022, the commission themselves came up with an ambitious list of goals and then created a strategic operations plan. And those goals are, they're really straightforward. It was 4 buckets is what we called them: maintaining the low census, facilities, conditions, and closures, which included the phase out of OC spray, programs and services, and training and personnel management. In fact, we were able to separate all 93 of the PRIT reform priorities into those 4 buckets and progressed really well on those outcomes during the course of the first year of the commission. Commissioner Yamashiro, former commissioner on this commission, said to me at one point, I don't even remember if it was in a public meeting, that's great that we met all the benchmarks and the plans. Did anything change within the probation department? Very smart thing to say. And I think you heard it echoed. I heard Commissioner Garcia-Leyes and Commissioner Terry say it today. I also heard Supervisor Horvath say it at the board meeting on Tuesday when we were talking about contraband and substance use disorder treatment, which is that we must move the measurement of our success towards looking at outcomes. Are we actually moving the needle? Are we actually changing things? Are we, what are the factors we're trying to impact? Is it recidivism, for example? That's a good one. I mean, try to reduce the number of times people are rearrested, youth and adults. Is it outcomes such as completing your high school diploma, or being employed when you finish the INVEST program, or having a successful reentry after AB 109? There are so many outcomes that we could measure, we being the county, the Probation Oversight Commission, and the Probation Department. And so I'm excited about rethinking the way we plan our strategies as a commission and as the staff of the commission to focus on the actual change and measuring the actual change. So as a result of that, we worked together, and this was actually very much a team effort of the staff to come up with a concept of the model of change based on our learning over the last 2.5 years. It's something you have attached to the agenda. The commissioners have it in their packets. It is a visual representation of the items that we've looked at and how we found success. So I'm just going to run really quickly through one example, which is the citation diversion program, not to be confused with the CDP electronic monitoring program we were talking about today. Same acronym, totally different program. Citation diversion program was something that was created recently within the probation department with the end of juvenile traffic court that happened as a result of court reorganization, and is generally working with young people who have very minor infractions, tickets, citations, as compared to the young people we generally are talking about who are in our facilities. So there were a group of advocates, actually some of whom were involved in our meeting today, who came up with a report that they presented to this commission. That's number 1, awareness, so uncovering issues. So the issue was presented to the commission. The commission received and analyzed data from those advocates, the researchers, and then requested information from the department. And in receiving information from the department, found some very startling information about tens of thousands of open cases. And then did number 3, clarification, asking the tough questions. The commissioners had meetings with probation leadership in which they asked difficult questions about driver's license holds and the impacts, listened to people talk and then asked those questions, and then made recommendations. So this commission passed a resolution that was actually both to the Board of Supervisors and to the courts, which I then forwarded. So in addition, there was a lot of other work going on, advocates working in the background around with their supervisors, the CEO's office coming out with a report that supported the findings in many ways. And then we got a call that the bench, in fact, had decided to end the program. So that goes into the 5, the decision makers act on recommendations. So in this case, it was the Superior Court who made the most significant decision, but then probation enacted that decision. And then number 6 is the enforcement. So to enforce and uplift success. So that change in the citation diversion program has led to many cases being diverted from probation to the Department of Youth Development. It's really a pretty exciting example of how this model of change worked. So that is exactly what we're hoping to do, is focus on looking through this funnel on some of the issues where we have not been successful at seeing the remarkable change or even incremental change. And so because of the capacity issues and wanting to be smart and wanting to not attempt to tackle everything, the POC staff put together a list of recommended 2023 to 2024 projects, which is also available on the agenda, and you have it in front of you. So this doesn't include everything I wish it did. It doesn't even include everything that was on the agenda today. But it is a way in which we can use our staff to move forward on this model of change. So there are a few things that we are required to do by law, by the Welfare and Institutions Code, most importantly, inspections and reporting. Reporting both to the BSCC, which is who we make our formal inspection report to, but more importantly to the Board of Supervisors. We are created as a commission of the Board of Supervisors, the eyes and ears of the Board of Supervisors, and focused on making sure that we are regularly communicating this. This is something that Supervisor Hahn asked us to change last year during our first annual inspection process, so that we are now reporting more regularly to the department on issues and getting responses. It's more of an iterative process. Then next is on use of force and OC spray phase out. That's a very important combination of items in the sense that there has been a recognition that OC spray is not the only use of force topic that merits discussion by or evaluation or analysis by the commission. And while we tabled the agenda item that contained that, I'm hopeful that the ad hoc committee actually can take on that request as well and then bring that back as a recommendation so that we can move from just evaluating OC spray and planning for OC spray phase out to looking at use of force in general. Then there is the issue of transparency and accountability with related to our dashboard. As I mentioned, we have had some extraordinary movements forward, even in the last 24 hours, where the department has provided data for us that now Donisha Smith, our project director, is having to prioritize what data to analyze first. That's really an exciting place for us to be because we have a lot of places where we can look into information. We continue to be interested and wanting to be responsive to the issue of sexual misconduct, focusing on the needs and desires of the young people, some of whom are now adults, many of whom are now adults, who were victims of that, of sexual misconduct and part of the allegations. We are continuing to focus on intake data, which I know we say that a lot. And just to clarify, the reason for that is just having a complete picture of who the young people are who are incarcerated in our county, what their charges are, what zip codes they come from. And we're very excited to be able to present to you some reports on that data extremely soon, maybe even initially as soon as the next meeting, which is great. Programs and services. So programs and services is absolutely something that all of the supervisors have indicated is a priority for them. There are some that have very serious levels of priority. Most crucially the issue of substance use disorder, substance use treatment, harm prevention. It's something that you've heard Supervisor Barger talk about consistently about the treatment programs. Supervisor Solis and Hahn had a motion related to this, brought us to the board this week to discuss it. There have been programs that have been highly recommended, funded, put forward by Supervisors Mitchell and Horvath. It is a 5-person team over there on the board around programs and services. We intend to focus most particularly on the substance use disorder treatment, and that's Dr. Gongora's area of particular focus in this coming year. Then related to maintaining the low census, decarceration. So this relates to structured release and girls decarceration, which again involves board motions by 4 offices, 1, 2, 3, and 4, not in that order, but where we're looking at other opportunities other than incarceration for young people and how those decisions are made and what role probation holds in that. Policy and review and recommendations. We've been doing this with relationship to the grievance policy, but looking into a lot of other things. And then the 2 big ones. The 2 big ones are LA model implementation. This is it's a gigantic issue because the LA model was intended to be a culture change for the entire department and something that in terms of looking at outcomes, we really want to study. What were the intentions? What has been implemented? What hasn't been implemented? What are the challenges? Does it work? What does that mean? So those are issues that Donisha will in particular be looking at. We're going to look at some other jurisdictions and get a sense of that. And then if the LA model is the plan, how do we staff it? The staffing issues are, I mean, we hear about it at every single meeting, every board meeting where probation is a topic, every Probation Oversight Commission meeting. Staffing is a crucial element. And so how do we make sure that the staff come to work and want to come to work and feel safe and supported and by us and by everyone? And also how are they in an environment where they have access to the training that they need, access to the tools that they need that they so often mention, and that they are able to be in the best place to provide the best services for young people. So it's a lot of things, but we are looking for your, I would like to say thoughts, although it is 12:57, your approval for these items and any of these items that you feel like we should not be paying attention to or glaringly missing from this list.
So Wendy's presentation is going to be followed by a motion by the commission to approve the attachments on the agenda. So I will put forth the first motion to accept the documents. That is I just want to make sure I get the name right. So the model for change, I got that, but then the 2023 and 2024 projects, simple title. Yeah, we're accepting. Seconded by Commissioner Canales. A vote?
Did you just say you love it? Can you say that into the microphone?
I love it. No. No, I really do. I'm not joking.
Thank
No
you.
discussion beyond that.
Sorry, one thing I remember that we had talked at a previous POC meeting was, I think, something related to Youth Justice Reimagined.
Yes.
And I don't know if that fit into one of these buckets or if we're kind of tabling that,
Yes.
but just.
No, not tabling. Definitely not tabling. And I think it fits into 2 of the buckets most particularly. And I'm actually going to ask Sarah and Donisha if they feel differently. Where it fits the most is decarceration. So reducing the number of youth incarcerated by finding alternatives to incarceration is the underlying premise of Youth Justice Reimagined. So I think that's where it fits the best. And then secondly, around the programs and services. So there are a lot of opportunities that have been growing, in particular because of the Department of Youth Development and the credible messengers and rethinking who's providing programs and how, that I think relate directly to the idea that re-examining who the experts in youth development are and who should be providing programs. So that's related to the LA model as well, of course, is in terms of a partnership model between county agencies, DMH, LACO, and also the programs who are community-based that are providing programs in the community, and the Department of Youth Development, of course. So yes, absolutely united. Did I miss anything? All right, shall I call for the vote? Okay. Commissioner Canales. Commissioner Garcia Lace.
Aye.
Commissioner Kakani.
Aye.
Commissioner Mundo.
Aye.
Commissioner Terry.
Aye.
And Commissioner Jackson. Thank you. That passes unanimously.
Right, moving on to agenda item number 8, which are matters not posted on the agenda. This is an opportunity. And we must. Okay, we need to do public comment for agenda item number 7. Anyone in the room like to speak to this? Please do.
I'm sorry that I didn't do that before the vote. I got excited about it being almost 1 o'clock. Go ahead, Eduardo.
I like the idea of getting to know these children, getting to know where they come from, what makes them tick. But also let's get to know their mental health. Let's get to know what's making them get in trouble. And that way there's, I guess, in that sense, there's a file on the problems that this child has that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. And you'll be happy to know that Dr. Gongora, who I mentioned, is a veteran of the Department of Mental Health and has that as her background. So certainly within the programs and services, that is also our focus. Anything online? Stephen, can we just take these as general? We have people with their hands. Not during this item. Okay. All right, so what are the names? Okay, Trey, we'd love to hear your public comment, if you can unmute yourself.
Hear me now?
Oh, that's weird. I can hear you, but really low.
Yeah, you sounded real low too.
Okay, we can hear you now. Okay, go ahead, Trey.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to just real brief. I just want to just thank the commissioners for all the work you're doing. I know sometimes you don't get acknowledged, so I just wanted to take this time out to say thank you from a person that's been in them rooms. You guys are doing great work, and to continue doing the great work is really being effective and touching the community and those children. They notice that you guys are advocating for them, so I'm going to just commend you guys on that. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Next commenter. Oh, Maureen Pacheco. Okay, great. Maureen, you're unmuted.
No, I'm sorry. That was a mistake.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all. Now back to matters not posted on the agenda. Commissioners, do you have any announcements or things you'd like to discuss at this time or have agendized for a future meeting? The thing we emailed about? Oh, okay, cool. All right, moving on to agenda item number 9. It's an invitation for members of the public to address the commission on items not posted on the agenda. Wendy, please.
Okay, anybody in the audience want to make public comment? Thomas is walking up, and if you'd like to make public comment virtually, please raise your hand using the raise your hand function or dial *3 on your phone.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, first off, what that guy was saying, I feel like it's a cop-out. There's another way for management to do what they want to do. But anyway, I know we always go back and forth. You know, I come up here at times like the angry probation officer, you know, always attacking. But I think today we heard some people that's not from probation. You know, one gentleman, the young man that was on the monitor thing as well, and another man who went through the system himself who had difference of opinions, who actually showed that they benefited from probation and what it had to offer. So I just wanted to say that, there are people out there that benefit from this. I would ask for you guys to also look out for those as well. I know we bring in a lot of people and a lot of guests and stuff that share their negative experiences. There's people, as we saw today, that have positive experiences too. I just want you guys to really pay attention to that. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Anybody else want to make public comment in the room? Go ahead, Eduardo.
Yes, Eduardo Dombrique. I just wanted to point out section 1302 of the Title 15. And this would be the section defining developmental disabilities. And it's as developmental disability applies to those persons who have a disability which originates before an individual attains age 18, continues or can be expected to continue indefinitely, and constitutes a substantial disability for that individual. The term includes intellectual disability, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and autism, as well as disabling conditions found to be closely related to intellectual disabilities or to require treatment similar to that for individuals with intellectual disabilities, but shall not include other disabilities that are solely physical in nature. I feel like juvenile justice is going in the direction of understanding developmental disabilities. And I just would like for everyone to keep that in mind as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any comment online? No one in the queue? All right, I'm going to bring the meeting to a close. Thank you all for joining us today and sharing. And sharing your comments. As a quick reminder, be sure to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel at LA County POC to receive reminders about our upcoming meetings and other POC happenings. Please visit our website at poc.lacounty.gov to subscribe to our email listing. I need to close out with a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Vice Chair Kakani, first motion.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Garcia-Lays. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves to vote with a voice. Oh, that's bad. All right. Wait, we just need to vote.
Aye.
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 COVID Chronicles. All right, we can close out today's meeting. It is 1:07 and it's good to see everyone.